So it's not a cure-all. You know, it's a management option that I utilize mainly when I'm trying to trap a bear that I catch a non-target, an animal that isn't the animal causing the problem. And I'll try and use that. We'll try and translocate those animals. But if we have a bear that's breaking into a house, getting into a house that's euthanized, it's not given a second chance if it's breaking in. But the non-targets are removed and taken to certain places. But again, we're just having a hard time trying to find a place to take a bear. There's a lot of bears in the state. The bear population is very strong. So, like I said, there's not a lot of supervisors that want them.
Even if there's locations that are far removed from communities, you know, if it's up on Grand Mesa or it's up on...
we're still getting, as a prime example, I had an adult sow. She was actually blind in one eye, and we translocated her. I'm trying to remember, it's either north of Rifle or north of Craig, but she made this huge circle. Just kept going and going, and we kind of made a joke because she kept turning right because she couldn't see out of one eye. But, I mean, that's how her radio location did. She just did this huge loop, and she came all the way back and came right back to Woody Creek where she was originally from. And she actually ended up getting killed by another bear that next spring, but she still produced cubs. The adult boars just do not make good translocations. They go. And they try and come home. We've actually took one that got into trouble up in Wyoming because he actually crossed up into the Wyoming area, and they end up putting it down. If it gets around any kind of domestic sheep, they're put down. So it's not the cure-all. Everybody thinks that we can just go and take a bear and remove it and take it someplace that's going to live happily ever after as a bear. And we're running maybe about a 30% success rate in all translocations that we make. So there's about a 70% chance that bear's not going to make it.
And then Kathy, or Brian, Kathy, if you have any experience with using some sort of sensors that would not only elicit off large noises, but perhaps water sprays that would deter the bears from getting into those areas and chase them away?
We haven't used those, but we do use the, we'll go up and honk the horn on the trucks, get it to run off. We do have a shotgun, a rifle to shoot rubber slugs into it. We haven't used it yet this year. And then we have a bear spray as well. Again, we haven't used any of that this year, but those are the methods we're planning to use as hazing.
Yeah, and there's nothing else, no other methods out there because it must be a problem not only here locally, but other landfills must have similar problems.
But yeah, this isn't an uncommon problem. I don't know, Kevin, do you have any?
You know, there's landfills all over. South Canyon has bears getting in there too, and everything. I'm not sure to the extent that their problem is what they have there. I know some places like up in my Montana and some of those guys, there's a thing called a critter getter. It's just an electronic device you set up, emits, it's on infrared or motion sensor, breaks the plane, emits this 120 decibel sound, resets once the animal's gone to a different sound. And that's been fairly effective. I don't know how well it'd work on a huge place like a landfill because you have such that food source. I mean, you got the attractant that's there, that's major. You know, the landfill is still an attractant. You know, the Highway 82 right below the landfill is probably the highest place we have for bear road kills on 82. There's one other spot down by Basalt where they're crossing to get to an apple or a pear tree or something. But right there at the landfill, I mean, we picked up 2 or 3 there already this year, and they're definitely coming out of the landfill. Probably traveling back and forth and going down to get water or something, I don't know. But that's a place that we get a lot of roadkill.
All right, thank you.
I don't know of any other than, I mean, you look at Montana and some of those other states, it's electric fencing.
All right, thank you. Rob?
And I'm just curious, Kevin, because Brian's given us a recommendation from the Colorado Parks and Wildlife. What would your recommendation be for solving this problem?
Well, obviously it's a good food year. And to me, it's just real evident. I mean, it goes to show you the number of calls in Aspen as well as the sightings at the landfill. Bears would prefer natural foods if it's available to them. We will have another food failure year. We will have another marginal food failure year. Whether it's next year or the following year, I'll guarantee it's going to be one of those, because we're usually on about a 2 to 3 year cycle when we have a food failure year. And when that happens, you're going to have errors in the landfill again. Whether we'll have the ones that go up to the back of the truck and try and get the trash as the people are trying to throw it out of their trucks, I don't know. But that's a safety issue that I think needs to be considered. When you're bringing in all this composting food sources from all over, that is a huge attractant. And I would definitely recommend that area get fenced. Fencing the whole landfill, if that would happen, we're gonna have to do something with the bears that are used to coming in there in hard food years, because I am fairly confident it's gonna push them right down into Aspen Village. And we're gonna have a major issue going on there. So I think for right now, I think it'd be good to fence the composting area, or where they're bringing in all the food sources. We did recommend a limited harvest on them to help kind of control the bear population overall on a limited hunt basis. But I think you'd want to take care of the food source first as much as you can. Definitely that composting area before you do that. But start to implement a limited harvest system in there, just like any place else, because we start getting these areas become refuges, just like we do with elk sometimes, and it becomes difficult, they'll come in. And I know in a lot of people's mind it's not a real sporting thing to do, to come up to a landfill and shoot a bear and stuff, but there are sportsmen out there that will do that, and we'll go up there and try and take a bear. But we do need to address the issue of what's bringing them in.
Rachel, then Michael?
Yeah, another component of this you had mentioned before was getting a better food grinder. What is the cost on that?
Right now, we're estimating just the grinder alone is about $500,000 to $600,000.
And is that programmed into the long-range plan or anything like that?
Yeah, we're going to go before the board in October, come back from October, but yeah, we're looking at grinding the food waste. Which will help, like I said, it's still in the
smell, I understand that.
it's still there. So yeah, $500,000 to $600,000, but the grinder also will be used for wood waste grinding, C&D grinding as well, so multi-purpose equipment.
Because it just seems that it's a component of this going forward, and I want to make sure that we're not leaving the larger food chunks doing electric fence and not, planning on all the different pieces that are going to be needed to make this happen.
A better grinder will definitely take it down to mix with wood waste.
Well, that's fine. And I don't want to see us curtail the food waste program. I think that is huge from an environmental standpoint of not just burying a valuable resource, and it helps with the landfill life and helps with making the composting of the wood products actually turn into compost and things like that. It's actually the direction more landfills are going now, rather than away from it. And it does kind of raise that question of, are we overreaching a little and perhaps taking more food waste than we can handle right now? I think that might be something we need to look at scaling back until we feel like we have the bear issue under control. In general, I support moving forward with the electric fence around the compost area. And I suppose it'd be more helpful for me if I had a map to look at it, because when you're talking about electric fence of the entire landfill, you're not really, maybe I didn't even see it, I just got back from vacation. I've read through the words, but you're not talking about like fencing off the shooting range area or the recycling area. It's more of a limited just to where the food is being, or the normal trash is being buried, as well as the composting area.
Correct. Maybe you can walk through the map, Ken.
Yeah, if you do look at the map, the shaded area off to the west of the site, that's the compost area. So that's looking at the limited compost area fencing. To fence the entire landfill, it would come up from Highway 82, surrounding the fill of the waste and down the access road back to 82. So The working phase would be hard to just kind of control the working phase because it's moving constantly. And right now it is adjacent to the compost area. But we have 25 years left on the landfill, so it'll move.
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
Is it possible to get a fence that we can relocate as we move the face of the landfill, you know, where the regular trash is being buried, given that the composting area would be fully fenced off? But is it possible to move it around?
We do, there are wind fences. We have some up there right now. It is possible to move them. It'll probably go up on your maintenance costs, but I believe it is possible to.
I mean, I just would find it surprising we have to go all the way down to Highway 82 along both sides of that road, and, you know, is there something that's a middle ground about a larger fencing than just the compost?
I'm sure there's something out there that,
Good look at it.
yeah.
But at least, I guess, I'm supportive of the compost area going forward.
Michael?
You know, I'm just not supportive of having hunts on county land, on the landfill. It's, in fact, even to call it a hunt is too dignified a word. So, I'm just, if you remember, we had a young lady from, I think, Colorado State University give us a talk about bears, and the upshot of her studies, she did the study, was if you remove the food source and you secure it, the bears simply don't go after it. What they exploit available food, and so they much prefer. They don't get habituated to food. They much prefer food in the wild, in their habitat where they feel comfortable. But in years of stress, they will come down. So the upshot of it was, you simply have to sequester your food and make sure the bears can't get into it, and they stop marauding through town. It was pretty simple. And so I think it's our responsibility to cut off access to the food at the landfill and make sure the bears can't get to it. And I think I mean, it seems like a lot of fencing, but it's a large area, and it's attractive to the bear. Whether it's composted food or household waste that's in plastic bags, they're still going to come up there and dig it up. They're very strong, they can do that. And they're not particular. So I think it's our responsibility to keep the bears out. We have asked our citizens, I've said this before, we've asked our citizens to lock up their waste, and we fine them if they don't. And yet now we're faced with a problem of locking up our waste, or our citizens' waste, and we're reluctant to do it. The cost is great. As Kathy said, it's going to be spread over 25 years minimum. So I think it's reasonable to do. I've had experience with electric fence, and it works very well. It works really well, but there's a lot of maintenance. You have to make sure it isn't grounded out. I think the problem for the landfill is it's going to be that there's a lot of things flying around there, and it's going to ground out. And so I think the way to deal with that is you have the fence in zones, and not all one operating unit, but 5 or 6 zones, and then feedback from those zones, you can tell what's shorted out and what's grounded out. The other problem for the landfill, actually, and electric fence, is that it's very dry up there, and electric fence needs moisture in the ground to complete the circuit between whoever touches it and whatever is grounded on their part with their paws. And so it's actually, I don't know how effective it would be up there because it is so dry. Or your grounding rods have to be very, very deep, and that helps. But there's lots of expertise out there on it. So I'd be perfectly willing to start on the composting electric fence. But but also reserving the ability to observe and see if it's necessary for the entire landfill. And then a very aggressive program of hazing the bears, but no hunting of the bears. If the Department of Parks and Wildlife wants to modify their hunting seasons and whatever, well, that's their prerogative, but I don't want to allow people to kill bears on our property. We've dealt with that issue. So, that's what I stand.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
Is there, aside from tagging the bears, is there any way to tell if the bears that are coming there are also ones that are raiding the alley dumpsters or whatever food supply in town?
I think, other than having them marked, no, but after the 5 or 6 years of the bear study and all the radio collars we have and all the ear tags that we put in and microchips, the bears in town aren't the ones using the landfill. A totally different population, basically. Right? A lot of the bears that are coming into the landfill, I'm sure, up around Wildcat and through Watson Divide area and all that are coming in and filtered in that way. And possibly even across from the river, because we're getting so much travel across Highway 82 by bears, especially in hard food years, but and stuff. But we never had one radio collar show up. We had one boar that we had radio collar we caught in Castle Creek, and then all of a sudden, even in a good food year, he took off and just went boom and all the way around to the other side of Mount Silvers. But never made a visit to the landfill. So landfill bears are pretty accustomed to the landfill because they know it's a food source they can get to when they need it. But everybody is exactly right. Bears prefer natural foods if they have them available to them. But there are always going to be some bears that are going to be food conditioned, and that's what they're going to.
How much sour sperry and acorn is there in that basin where the landfill is?
This is great, a lot.
There is a lot. I mean, I presume I haven't really looked at it.
Yeah, I haven't all gone and walked all the way around there, but I mean, the acorns this year are really coming on strong. And there's a lot of, the landfill kind of sits in that okra silver-sperry interface and everything. And so there's a lot of natural foods around there. And I'm sure that's the reason that we aren't getting any bears in the landfill this year. I'll guarantee you that's why.
My sentiments go along very closely with Michael's. I think we need to do the electric fence first before we would even consider doing a controlled one. Obviously, looking at the cost of it, if we could just do the composting site and the burying site on the face there, that would be much more cost effective than doing the whole. There still will be bears showing up outside the fence for sure, because they'll still be able to smell and they're going to be snooping around there. But thinking back when they closed the Yellowstone landfill, where they used to feed the bears intentionally for the tourist attraction, but then when they quit doing that, the bears eventually quit coming. They went off to back to their other food supply. I think we really need to do that first, and then if a bunch of bears are showing up, if there's a way to try to identify them, do a paintball mark them or something, just to see if it's the same bears there day after day after day, and if
That's another hazing.
then those would be the ones you'd want to target if there were going to be a hunt.
Right. I mean, I've actually recommended paintballs to people, citizens around their houses. If they have a bear coming around, if they have a paintball gun, just don't use red, just because somebody sees red on a bear and that bear is injured or something like that. So use the blues or the yellows, and I don't know if they make that with an oil base or not, but it's all water based, so it washes off in a heartbeat. But it might stay on there for a couple days to see if it's the same bear coming in. But it's another hazing method. I mean, it would definitely do that. They make pepper ball guns too, that shoot out pepper balls, use them in law enforcement. We've used them on bears before too, and shoots out a cayenne capsule powder. And sometimes you can hit it in the brush right above the bear, it gets that down around their eyes and their thing, and it's not pleasant, and that can work too. But yeah, real hazing. I can't remember the fella that used to have a landfill before.
Franklin.
No, big guy, but anyway, they got to know his truck. I mean, as soon as they see his truck come, they knew they were gonna get hit with a rubber slug or a rubber buck, and they took off and hightailed it out. They'll probably always, I mean, they'll come in at night, you know, if you start doing this hazing, you can get them to stay back, we can get them to stay back where the people aren't there, that's good, but they'll probably still come in and try and dig through the face at night.
Is there I know it's private land up by Wildcat, but are there hunters that go up there? Are they get private?
I don't know about
permission?
Wildcat. It's some of the private property around the landfill isn't hunted very heavily for bears. That's just the landowner's preferences, whether they allow it or not.
Yeah.
We did make an effort. I mean, this area is in what we call a suppression mode as far as management goes. We're trying to suppress the population and knock it back. And so we split the game management unit into with Capitol Creek as the divider, forcing and issuing licenses for the area from Capitol Creek toward the Crystal and Thompson, and from Capitol Creek up toward Aspen through Aspen. And so we set a certain number of licenses for each side, trying to actually have more sportsmen harvest bears up in this area where we have such a high conflict. Whether that'll work or not, I don't know. I mean, past studies have shown just increasing harvest doesn't necessarily equate to minimizing conflict. And but you know, that's what we have control over, and that's what we can try and do. And then I think other than electric fencing and just getting people to abide by the trash ordinances and have aggressive enforcement of that is what we really need. So.
Rob? You know, one of the problems that really hasn't been mentioned is you start fencing off areas and it moves the bears to somewhere else to get a food source. So we need to get from A to Z, and part of that, I think, is thinning the crowd. Because you can't just take away the food source and expect the bears to disappear or all go to natural foods. Some of them are going to come down to various populated areas around the landfill. So I do think the long-term solution is taking this food source away from the bears and moving the bears back into their natural habitat. I don't think that happens just with a fence. I think they're not going to go to natural habitat 100%. They're partially going to go to human habitat that we've taken away from the bears over the years. The other question I had was, it'd be nice to get a recommendation, Kevin, from you or whoever, on what the best timing is to install this fence. I mean, have we missed the time for the year? Should it be so when they come out of hibernation, it's there? They're already in their cycles and their tracks. I don't know the answers to these things. But it seems to me it might make more sense to do the fencing in the spring versus now, or maybe not.
You know, I think it's just a matter, right now with the minimal number of bears that are coming in, I think you could do it any time, but definitely you'd want it installed before, if we can, before they come out of hibernation next spring.
Yeah.
If the opportunity and the weather holds, to me, why not get a start on it this year and have it in place and try and work out your problems before the bears actually come in and start testing it. And however the design goes, I mean, I know it's going to be an issue because of the gates and stuff like that, and bringing gates through. I don't know if, Brian, if they've checked into electrified cattle guards. They use those up around Lake Louise and things like that. But, you know, I would fence it right, I mean, even now, I mean, that'd be fine. I mean, because there's not that many bears coming in and stuff, so I don't think there's such a wonderful food supply out there this year that I don't think you're going to run any bears onto Aspen Village this year just because you put a fence around that composting area this year. So keep our fingers crossed for next year, good food source, and maybe it won't happen again next year. you just can't predict.
What does an electric fence look like? I mean, how tall is it? How many strands? Is it in the packet?
Should probably be a 7-strand alternating hot ground, I assume.
That's correct.
7 foot tall tensile wire. 7 strands of high tensile, yeah.
So is there another way to do fencing around there, to fence off the compost area and then have an entranceway, like Kevin was suggesting, an electric sort of cattle guard versus entire electric fence that may be less costly and less maintenance upkeep?
Yeah, I mean, I like that idea because it would take out the gate option. And that way we don't have to make sure it's open for when trucks come in. We'll look into that.
So Dorothy, did you want to say something?
Whenever you have public comment, I do
Okay.
that.
Well, we'll allow public comment, but it's a work session, but that's fine. I would support doing some sort of fencing around the compost area this year, and perhaps look at some other alternatives that may be less costly and less high maintenance as well. And since we don't have a critical issue right now, I would hold off on issuing any hunting tags and sort of take this sort of a step at a time and see how this process works with the continued any sort of harassment that you're currently doing to chase bears off. So that would be my recommendation for it.
I agree.
Michael?
There's also, I can't find it right now, but there's rolling electric fence, which they use for pasture animals to move pasture animals down a pasture, so they don't eat the whole pasture at one time. And you could try that too. All you do is put droppers on it, which is just wires hanging down that don't touch the ground, but that'll move. So, I mean, I don't know, I think there are lots of alternatives other than a permanent fence and having sort of these fixed boundaries. You know, one of the best ways to train the animals is to actually get the animal to touch it. So they'll never do it again, because it's like being kicked in the spine. So you grease the wires and let them go at it.
Dorothy, you want to make a comment?
Two very brief comments. One, Steve just says, a resident of the county forever, and spent 6 years with DOW as the environmental representative on that board, which is geared, as you know, to a large degree for hunting as a way of harvest. I was appalled that we're bringing in a food source from outside the county, and then we're talking about allowing killing of the bears who are drawn by the source that's being brought into the landfill. So I just want to, I'm just personally astonished that Pickton County would agree that we're creating a situation where more bears are showing up, and then we're going to have a season on bears at the landfill. I don't think that's exactly what a good portion of Pickton County looks for from leadership from Pickton County. I just want to bring that up. I do represent a lot of people who are opposed to the concept of having a season on bears at the landfill instead of trying to find the solution for it. So that concept just blows me away. Two, Lee Tharp is here, who could answer a question I think came up about how is there a bear problem in South Canyon. He works for Heartland. Third, I hope that, I'm skipping now to the fact that I work with Heartland, who's the operator at the landfill. I think there has to be a cooperative discussion, even before, if fencing is what you decide to do, about how it's going to affect the entire operation of the landfill, rather than just this one portion, so that there's some collaborative discussion that goes on about how it affects the entire operation out there, because it's more than just this one piece of the entire operation. And thank you. My mind remembered that we did have public, so I didn't mean to.
So Brian and Kathy, have you talked or had a discussion with Heartland?
we want to get direction from the board, and then we'll have that collaboration, because they're the operator of the landfill we'll need to be working with for that installation. We can do that.
You want to identify yourself?
Yes, I'm Lee Tharp. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Heartland Environmental Services. Heartland is the parent company for Pickens County Waste Systems and also for South Canyon Waste Systems. Ken was talking about, I totally agree that it's a great fruit crop out there, and we are not seeing the bears at either site the way we normally would in the rough years. I tell you, in 1999, when we were awarded the contract, the landfill was fairly, the cover was not occurring very well. Bears were everywhere. Brian, remember when they had, the cubs were crawling up power poles, getting electrocuted, and within a year, we got everything covered up, and we put anti-bear devices on the poles, so they couldn't, kind of like an anti-squirrel, we couldn't climb up your feeder. And it's really, over the years, it's worked out very well. You are always going to have, though, some bears. This year, we're not seeing much of any. At South Canyon, I've seen a mother and 2 cubs one time. We will see evidence every other day, sometimes every day, that they've dug into the working face a little bit, but they really aren't creating much of a problem with it. What we're seeing this year is they're going straight to the fresh watermelons and heads of lettuce at the food composting. That's because it's just right there and it's easy to get to. It's what they like. I wanted to add that I think that the fencing, I always get nervous when we tend to do one thing, and we've got to keep in mind what's the byproduct of doing that. And I think what you're going to see is if we fence off the food composting area, they're going to move to the working face. We can't fence the working face because that working face moves all around right now. We think, Kathy, about 15, 20 acres up on top of there.
Yeah, and we'll be up there another 2 years.
Yeah, so it's going to continue to move. And I'm afraid that if you try to fence off the whole thing, we're just going to put the bears into people's backyards and their houses. So to me, I look at it and say maybe to some degree, they're going to come in to that area anyway, because they are going to always smell garbage, even if we cover every day like we do. But at least if that's where they're coming, they're not harming other people, they're not going into the residences. I'm afraid that fencing one thing just pushes them to another. And if we fence the whole thing, then we push them into homes. That's the only thing I would be concerned about.
All right, thank you. So it seems like I'm getting a sense of the board that we want to experiment with at least some sort of fencing around the food waste area and look at how creative we can be in that it doesn't inhibit your normal operations, but still addresses the problem, and try it for a year and see how it works.
Okay, we can do that.
Rachel?
I agree, and I would say that I have had a number of public comments about not wanting to see Pitkin County allowing any harvest at that site. And I think that some of the balancing concerns have not really gotten out there that well. And one is that we really have had a bear problem long before we started doing more food composting, and in more significant numbers, and it depends on the food year in the wild more than what we're doing there now. I mean, that's just from my first day with Pitkin County, hearing about the bears at the landfill. It's only as they get more brave and bold that it perhaps becomes a problem to the humans who are up there. I would like to see us investigate some of the other techniques that Michael had brought up about a rolling fence. And it may be that if you get shocked a couple times with the compost area, you even see the other fencing and you're just not going to get near it. And I don't know if there's additional visual clues that can be added to the fence so that you can see another fence, and it may or may not even be electrified right now, but you just don't want to find out. And so if we can look at something that might help us with the trash facing area as well would be helpful, so that we know what our next phases are as we move forward.
Okay, with that, I think we need to move on to our rest of our agendas, but thank you all for attending. The board want to take just a short break,
Just 5.
a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll get back on schedule. Okay, we had some technical difficulties earlier for grassroots, but this is our Tuesday, August 13th regular Board of County Commissioners work session. And next on the agenda, we have two citizen board renewal interviews, both with the Healthy Rivers and Stream, Bill Yokers and Richard Neely. And I just wonder, throw this idea out to the board, should we bring Richard and Bill up here so we can have more of a discussion with both of them, or do you want to do it individually?
Both would be great.
Sure. Yeah, you guys know each other. Why don't you come on up and we'll just have a nice discussion this way, since you're both up for renewals. And welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for reapplying and all your work. The last 4 years, it's gone by really quickly, huh?
Been a quick learning experience.
Yeah. So we received your application, so we read some of the answers to those questions, but I'll just throw this up to the board, and we can take turns responding. Michael?
Bill and Rick, what do you think are the biggest successes of the Healthy Rivers today?
Well, from my perspective, the overwhelming big home run is the resolution of the West Divide water case.
Do you take credit for that?
No. But I certainly rejoice.
I agree with Bill, although I think he's being a little too humble about it. He should take some credit for it, because he was not only on our board, but acted as counsel in that case. That's certainly, I think, our biggest project success, if you will. But from my point of view, one of the successful things we've done is we've really began to develop a format for operating and a protocol for considering our finances and what sort of funds are available for future projects and for grant applications and whatnot, which, because this was a new program, we really had no guidance, and in response to some comments that came from this board, and I think the need that was observed in the Healthy River and Streams Board itself, Bill set up a subcommittee, and we spent some time developing what I think is a little better format for reviewing finances and for getting a better grip on what we can do to control our finances and project them better, and create some reserves for projects that may come up in an opportunistic way. So, that's a less interesting, certainly less exciting aspect, but I think we've been real successful in getting the program off the ground and trying to develop a good protocol for how to operate it.
I'll just tag on to those comments, because I know one of your responses, Bill, in terms of what you would like to see as you move forward, is the ability for the board to really sink their teeth into some projects. And Bill and I have discussed this previously, but I wonder if you don't see or do see the work we're doing at the ABC with a settlement pond, which has directly addresses the quality of the Roaring Fork River. Wouldn't that sort of fit under a goal for a specific project that meets sort of the goals of the Healthy Rivers and Stream Board?
All right, I'll respond to that. I think one concern we had when that came up, of course it meets the goal of improving water quality, no doubt about that, but so does every culvert under every county road in the county. And when I think of what did the voters intend to approve when they agreed to tax themselves for this fund, and a thought I had was that it's not to supplement the general fund. It is for special, extraordinary projects related to water quality and quantity. And when that came before us, it sort of felt as if, hey, the county had this this project, and maybe it's running a little over budget, and there's the Rivers and Stream Board, let's go to them. Now, I'm not saying that never should this board fund a county project like that, but I think thought should be given, and it should be, it shouldn't come to us as an afterthought, and that's the feeling I had. It should be something from the very beginning, an extraordinary project.
George, I think maybe I was a little more supportive of that project than the rest of our board. I actually think it fits well within the parameters of the program, and I think it's a great project. And what's going on out there, from at least what I've observed, in particular with respect to the drainage down the slope towards the river, is really, really good stuff. I actually thought that we had asked Road and Bridge to check in with some of the main property owners out there to see if they might participate, and then come back to us, and was a little bit surprised that we didn't get any further request. I don't know that it would have gotten through this board, and the recommendation for participation would have come to you guys, but I sort of thought that's where we were headed with it. So I happen to think it's a project that does fall within what our charter is.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Rachel?
Yeah, just a brief comment on that. I guess I lie somewhere in between you, and I think you both have good points. On the one hand, I have stated publicly at the meetings that we should build into the budget of the project what we need to and would like to do with it. On the other hand, I think when we get to the oil separator, it's kind of above and beyond what the EPA would require from us. And it's making up for what I would call a lot of past sins at the ABC in terms of how it was developed originally. And so it's a little hard to ask the general fund to remediate everything from the past. So I would have seen a small level of participation, although certainly not funding the whole thing. But that's neither here nor there. It's just kind of somewhere in between. I guess my question, or maybe this is more of a dialogue than questions and comments, but I feel there's a need to find out how we as Picken County and our Healthy Rivers and Stream Board fits into this larger statewide water planning that's ongoing now, because it's really been moved up to a much more aggressive level. The 1177 Basin Roundtable just reviewed consultant proposals to develop our, quote, basin implementation plan. And each basin is required to do a basin implementation plan, but it's not only how do we protect and provide for the future water needs of our basin, consumptive and non-consumptive, but how does our basin perceive solving the rest of the problems in the other basins. And so, the draft of that proposal is supposed to be to the governor for the statewide water plan by the fall of 2014, and then a final plan adopted in 2015. Those are pretty tight timelines given the work. And so I think it's not been unsaid before, but I tend to attend a lot of the statewide legislative meetings and Water Congress, and Bill, you certainly are a good attendee at a lot of those information sessions. The IBCC, Interbasin Combat Committee, and the 1177s. But how do we go from our work here locally where, we might want to secure some more water rights on the Roaring Fork, which I would be totally in favor of if we could find some good ones, versus the new, IPPs that are going to be going forward to take new water out of our basin, and how do we take our work as in-stream restoration banks, water flows, these issues, and play at the state level, I guess is the best way to say it. And we do a lot of that through John Ely's office now. So a lot of the expenditure of our funds is not seen on the ground. It's not seen in physical projects. It's seen in wins like the Divide, where it was, $340,000, $360,000 worth of legal work to win that case. And it will continue to be that, whether it's Postad Tunnel or, change cases and water courts and RISIDs. So how do we go from just being here really parochially while the train might run right over us at the statewide level?
That's yours.
I guess I have to confess, I haven't followed as much as I might have exactly what's happening on the statewide level, because I hear about it more when I sit down at board meetings or when I, have a conversation with you or some other people or the people on the Conservancy. But, I do think we're engaged and concerned about it, and certainly because we have, as our, principal staff person, John Ely, John brings that kind of thing to us, and I'm not sure how we can participate more other than to say that, we have a fund that's available to do good local planning, and we certainly have participated in litigation where we thought that it was necessary to help avoid the removal of water from this basin, and I think we need to continue doing that. I think we've been real successful at that so far, and it may be that we just need to have a little better understanding of exactly where we could fit in that process. I don't know precisely where that is, Rachel, but certainly if someone were to come to us and say, here's a project that I think you ought to undertake in order to dovetail better with what's going on a statewide basis, I think we would look at it and probably be real supportive of it.
One of the things that came out in the West Divide water case in the form of a amicus brief filed by the Denver Water Board was that there are more than 1,500 other conditional water rights in this state in which nothing has been done on the ground for 50 years. And one of the things I wonder if we can do is start checking those out in terms of one's conditional rights to go to the Front Range, and maybe others are vulnerable to attack. Maybe we can start a movement to look at these 50-year-old rights that have just been held because there's no opposition and start opposing a few. Now, I have heard that if all the conditional rights to take water to the Front Range were made absolute and were utilized, there would be just no water over here. On the other hand, California and the lower basin states, they're our friend. And the Denver Water Board never will be.
Yeah, maybe Denver Water Board less than Colorado Springs. Others are in terms of their look to takes from us, but that's the only real feeling I have. It's amorphous as well because it's hard for anyone to know where they're fitting into these plans. But I've been trying to raise the voice to say, no, don't eliminate recreational and channel diversion rights. And from the Front Range, it's coming over, oh no, any new right has to make allowances for future diversions to occur. And I think through some of the statewide work, we're going to see what would happen if the conditional rights were developed, because that's been, the chicken and egg with developing a basin implementation plans. How do we solve our own water needs as a basin when we don't even know what those conditions on the ground would be if more of these conditional rights were made absolute. So it's very chicken and egg, but that's just kind of a creeping thing for me. Is like I can see easily how we do something on the ground, but I can't see easily how we continue to protect ourselves from the statewide take. And having these resources at all is why we were able to defeat West Divide.
Well, Rachel, one of the things that we've talked about a lot on the board is just having a good basis in scientific information and reports on what the impacts are to this valley of diversions of water, and we've started in that direction to develop that, the reports and the studies, et cetera. But we've, I think, been convinced that our best tool for being able to fight diversions is to have good science behind us to show what the impacts are here. Not just science, but good economics too, I think. And one of the things that has recently come up with the Conservancy is the desire to do a 10-year, 2003 or 2004 there was a state of the frying pan study done, and I think we're going to update that so that we can sort of continue to have both the scientific and economic and social data out there to use to help hopefully reduce the amount of diversions that we are likely to be subject to in the future.
Other questions, Rob?
Well, let me just follow up on that, Rick. So is the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board looking more to do much like that economic study of land property values based on the amount of water that's in various rivers, are we looking to get some real hard data through the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board to fight the battle of whether the water is worth more here or there?
I don't know, Rob, if it's so much a matter of doing a study on the economic value of the water to real estate values. That's an interesting project, but it certainly doesn't, I don't know if it gives us the hard data that we need, but we have undertaken some other projects, such as the study of the section of the Roaring Fork above town and the impacts of drought and low water years. And I think that's the type of information that I'm talking about right now, is the hard data that shows what the real impacts on the water are from diversions, or on the river are from diversions. You know, I think if we build up that kind of information, we're probably going to be in a better position anyway than we are right now to fight the type of the diversions that we see coming down the line.
And one other question I had was, Bill, you mentioned about having a better collaboration with Open Space and Trails Board. What did you have in mind when you put that down?
Well, they've got water rights, and we don't. And they've got more money than we have, and some of it, I guess, can be spent on our projects. Now, there's some concern that maybe we've got too large a reserve, that we haven't been spending enough, and there are a lot of dollars spent or accumulated that we haven't spent. But I keep thinking, if Gail Schwartz's legislation on conserved water, if that succeeds, then there are so many things we can start doing that we cannot now do. We can help people put in sprinkler systems, we can improve head gates, we can line ditches, and when those, if and when those opportunities come along, the reserves that we have are gonna
Go quick.
seem very small. So I'm not really concerned about the amount of reserves we're building up. I sure hope she's successful, though.
Yeah.
Steve?
Bill, you talk about having projects that the Healthy Streams and Rivers Board would start as your own projects. What sort of projects do you have in mind for that?
Well, that statement was sort of in reaction to the feeling that there we sit, people diving on us for requests for funds, and so much of our time has been spent just sort of evaluating what other people bring to us and what to give to it, and it seems that at times our own visions, we don't have time, we haven't spent enough time doing that, and we have formed this finance committee, which I think is a good step forward. Now, my next idea would be that we form a dream team, and that the dream team be a committee which just contemplates the future and what can we do, what our own stuff, and I just don't think we've spent enough time doing that. Too much time reacting and not enough time acting.
And both of you mentioned having more staffing help to help you fulfill your mission. And how would you see that taking place, and what would Lisa, or probably would be Lisa right now, but what do you envision with more staffing? How would you utilize that?
Steve, I don't know where we're going to end up with staffing. As with Open Space and Trails, in its early days, this is a program that's still developing and maturing. I wouldn't see us ending up with the type of staff that program has, because of course they own hard assets on the ground, and we don't really do that, and we probably won't really do that, other than we could acquire some water rights. But everybody on our board is busy doing a lot of different things, and it's hard to focus on what we're doing when you meet once a month. Everybody gets all excited when you sit down and we have a conversation about things and everybody gets real thoughtful, and then of course you go back to doing what you do in your everyday life, and it's hard to address it. And one of the things I think that Lisa can do for us in conjunction with John's office is sort of keep us moving forward on some of the projects we undertake, just by being able to process more information and get that out to us. I mean, she's really good at it right now, but sort of just to be able to spend more time in addressing, like we'll sit down and say, gosh, we started this project regarding the recreational in-stream in-channel diversion in Basalt 2.5 years ago. And every time we sit down, we say, let's get back on track with that. And we just sort of need somebody out there that can spend a little more time, get memos out to us, say, here's where we are, here's what we need to do. Let's call a special meeting if we need to, or let's get a telephone conference going. And I think with more time available to us through Lisa, or as you say, whoever it may be, it can keep all of our attentions a little more focused, and it will take some of the burden off of us to try to get things done when we're not sitting in a meeting with everybody there getting enthusiastic about stuff.
Rick, you're one of our designees that are outside the county, one of those seats. What do you hear, or do you have discussions with people down valley in terms of the idea of them pursuing a similar program?
You know, I haven't really heard much of that. I do talk to folks on the Glenwood Springs River Commission fairly often. Those issues tend to focus more on access and recreational stuff. I talk to people on the Conservancy, of course, because I'm on that board as well, a lot. And there's a lot of enthusiasm for the types of projects that we undertake and the protection of the resources that we undertake. This board's and this county's assistance with respect to the stuff that's going up in Coal Basin. And that word gets out. People do know that Healthy Rivers and Streams in Pickens County have been important players in what's going on particularly I think in the Crystal River Basin right now, but also with respect to stuff that's going on in the Frying Pan. There was a pretty disappointing meeting regarding the operations of Root Eye and the Frying Pan recently, and that engendered a fair amount of community interest and support, and certainly this board has a good role to play, and Pickens County has a good role to play in what happens in those areas that are outside of Aspen. In fact, we've focused a lot down there. I'm not sure how far below Carbondale the message of what we're doing and the results of what we're doing really get. My impression is that the political will is different in Garfield County than it is here. There's a pretty good political will in the city of Glenwood Springs, and they have their own funding and their own programs, but I think they're a little bit more focused on recreational resources and less focused with water preservation and quality and development. So, what I hear is real positive feedback from Carbondale, from Basalt, from the Conservancy, from a lot of people down there that I engage with in the recreational floating and fishing community. They know what's going on with this program, and I think they're grateful for it. I'm not sure how much they really understand, but there's no question that when something like West Divide comes out, people step back and say, wow, I'm really glad that Pickens County has this fund and that they're using it in a way that we're seeing some results on the ground. I'd like to see more physical results on the ground, but that's a little slower process, and it's we haven't been quite as successful in finding good projects that we can actually put hard dollars into on the ground. We might have missed some opportunities like the Airport Business Center, but we've talked a lot about the desire to do things that people can actually physically see, and I think Bill's right. Depending on where some of the legislative initiatives go, we may have a lot more opportunities. And we've talked a lot about doing ag efficiencies and doing work to improve quality of head gates and stuff like that. And I personally would like to see more of an on-the-ground presence for this board for Pickens County, and a lot of that can be in conjunction with open space and trails too, I think. But I would say all in all, the exposure that we've gotten down valley and the feedback that I get is all really positive. I don't see Garfield County initiating a program like this. I do see support coming from the town of Basalt and the town of Carbondale. And, we've reached out to them in connection with their various projects. We often hear we don't have any money, but it's interesting when you actually put something together and approach them. They usually can come up with either some in-kind contributions or some actual cash contributions. And I think Open Space and Trails has found that to be true also. This stuff's not quite as sexy as going out and buying, a nice chunk of land that everybody can see along Highway 82 that's going to be preserved in perpetuity. But I don't question whether it's any less important.
Thanks. Rachel?
Again, more of a comment, but if you look at the origins of the Open Space Fund and their initial work in the early years, it was always relying very heavily on their partners, and it continues to be so. And there were very many, Roaring Fork Outdoor Volunteers, Aspen Valley Land Trust, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Forest Service, and so on. And I think that when we look at our fund and the Healthy Rivers and Stream Fund, in the ballot language, it specifically said to leverage our funds because we knew it wasn't a huge amount with these other opportunities. So, for me, I go back to the old saying, you can always get anything done if you don't care who gets the credit. And so I don't know so much that I want to be reinventing the wheel when you do have groups that have been active for so long, like the Watershed Collaborative, or Trout Unlimited, or the Roaring Fork Conservancy, or even the CWCB has grant money. And just at the last meeting of the 1177, it was a total of about $147,000 that were allocated from our basin accounts, and some of that was in Pickens County, and some of it was in other portions for ag efficiencies and improving ditches. I think up on Missouri Heights was one of them, and so on. And so I guess my caution is just that, I don't want to be able to seek out projects just because nobody has thought of them yet, and that we can say they're our project, as much as continuing to be a convener of people to say it is possible for us all together to raise this big nut to get this project done. And I don't think you were saying anything opposite of that, but it is the way it is. There's so many good partners out there for us to be working with.
Any last-minute thoughts you want to share with us?
It's been a really interesting process to get involved with this board because it was a new entity, and it took us some time to get some traction and to figure out how best to move forward, and we're still working on that. I guess one of my principal observations over the last 3 years of when we've really been doing things is that we've certainly spent the largest portion of this fund, almost $1 million, and maybe a little more at this point, on water litigation. And although that's a number that's pretty significant, my feeling is that there's been a really, really good use of this fund, and that we've seen some good successes, and I think we'll see some more in the future. But that's not all we want to do. It's been fun to be on the board. It's been really educational to be on the board. We've gotten some great presentations from people that have really been an eye-opener in many respects, and I really look forward to continuing to participate. So,
Bill?
if it's your will, I'll stick around.
Yeah, if you reappoint me, I'll willingly serve. I've enjoyed it, and I've certainly been educated. One thing I wonder about, how is it that we've been in business 4 years and nobody from any other county has ever come to us and said, hey, what are you guys doing? Maybe we should be doing the same. And I wonder how many counties, other counties have open space and trails funds. And I guess Boulder and
Not many.
Jefferson.
Eagle,
Eagle.
and maybe those outfits, maybe those counties would be interested in what we're doing, do the same, or consider it.
I think, as Rick said earlier, I think they are aware when we sit in on meetings. People
Right,
always
Northwest Council of Governments.
People always compliment Pickens County and the citizens for understanding, recognizing the need to protect this valuable resource, and they compliment the Healthy Rivers and Stream program. Unfortunately, the political wills of some of those counties won't let them move forward, but I think there is strong recognition. So thank you both for your service, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you again soon.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see, next on the agenda is the, I guess, staff is looking for our input on the draft West of Maroon plan. Cindy and Ellen are here.
You want to put a few now?
Sure.
George, while they're doing that, I might offer the board one correction on issue number 2. We have the open space designation for county-owned approximately 20-acre parcel immediately north and west of the city of Essen snow dump property, which has been a parcel that we've discussed in the past. What's not captured in this, and I think has emerged in our dialogue, is that parcel was originally purchased with a combination of FAA funds as well as actually a smaller portion of general funds. And what had not really been done historically is to divide out which portion of the properties had been acquired for what purpose with the funds. And so we've gone through that process, and actually a lot of the parcels that we originally had started a discussion about county facilities and such on were purchased for protecting air runway approaches and potentially future development at the airport. And so issue 2 as it's laid out is actually probably not one that's ripe for discussion right now. I think we're going to see a correction on that in the future drafts of the WAMP. But in fact, what we have is the majority of that 20-plus acres up to the point where it really drops off into the Roaring Fork Valley Gorge was purchased with FAA funds for protecting the approach and for any future aeronautical developments. As the board's probably still aware, in the master plan that you just adopted for the airport properties, we don't have any physical development anticipated on that, so we anticipate right now that our use is to protect that approach for the runway. And if there was any future consideration, it'd probably have something to do if there's a change in navigational aids or such, but we really don't have any plans on the books right now. And so I'd encourage the board to probably not spend a lot of time right now in issue 2. That correction is coming, and it's been the result of a lot of due diligence work that we've been doing on who owns what and such over the last year.
All right, great, thanks, John.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. Let's see, let's swap seats with you so I can manage these. It's you.
I'll pound forward.
Want to
Do you guys want me to move?
No, we have, come on up.
Cindy, you want to introduce the rest of the
I
crew?
do, yeah. This is Jim Vicincy. I can't say it right. Vicincy, I never say it right, and I look over. Jim is on our P&Z along with Myrta Mallory, who have been helping us construct the plan. We also have Tim Malloy in the background, who's been working very closely with us on behalf of Pickens County Airport. And Ellen Sassano, our long-range planner. And I thought I'd start off just briefly by giving a little bit of background so that we can kind of have some roots with why we're doing a west of Maroon Creek plan. And I won't go way back, but back in 2006, we redid the Pickens County Land Use Code. And the Land Use Code, all the specifics in the Land Use Code always are directed by master plans in the community. And when we redid the Land Use Code in 2006, we had very clear direction from all the rural caucus areas and all those plans. We had a lot of great direction. The one area that was still sort of a hole for us as far as direction was the urban growth boundary area around Aspen. And we've been waiting, hoping to get that direction from the land use perspective so that we now can start making some amendments to the land use code. When we redid the land use code in 2006, we were very specific about pulling out what was rural and what was urban. Up until that point, the code sort of melded into our zone districts, and it didn't have as specific of urban and rural character kinds of zoning and guidelines. So we felt like we really refined that in 2006, and we were able to make that happen. And what we've been wanting to have happen now is just this. It's the west of Maroon Creek planning area that will give us some specific land use designations and direction that we can now start amending the code based on the direction from the plan. In addition to that, we waded through work on the Aspen Area Community Plan because that gave the aspirational kind of guidance to us. But beyond that, it had a chapter that was called the West of Castle Creek Plan. From that, some very specific guidelines on transportation, scenic quality, and land uses came directly out of the Aspen Area Community Plan. So this is a follow-through on the aspirational direction of the Aspen Area Community Plan, which your Planning and Zoning Commission, along with the City Planning and Zoning Commission, worked very hard on for a number of years and was adopted in 2012. We've been working on the west of Maroon Creek Plan for about a year, and it feels like more, but it's wonderful. We're happy with this plan. The major components of this plan, like I said, took its direction from the Aspen Area Community Plan, focusing on transportation, scenic quality, and land uses. So with that, we have a more physical plan that's derived out of the aspirations of the goals from the Aspen Area Community Plan. And unless you have any questions on the specifics, the boundaries are behind you and also on the wall over here to my left that show you basically that we're going from the end of the Pickens County Airport runway property along the Highway 82 corridor, kind of the visual aspects of the corridor, up to the Maroon Creek Bridge, which is kind of closer over by Rob. And the hashed marks, or the darker as it appears on your screen, marks are the city jurisdiction, while the yellow is the county jurisdiction. And as you know, we have a long history, basically back to the 60s, where we've done joint plans for the general area, what was used to be called the Aspen General Area, and then became the Aspen Metro Area, and then became the Aspen Urban Growth Boundary Area, of working with both jurisdictions of the city and the county. So with that, the county took the lead on development of this plan. The city had just put a lot of effort into the Aspen Area Community Plan, and that's where we are today with a draft of the plan. And Ellen has outlined what we think are topic areas that you will be the most interested in, but don't limit your comments if you've had a chance to read the draft plan, which we cited for you in your memo, where it can be found on the Aspen-Pickens County website for anyone viewing. That plan, that draft is available if they'd like to take a look at it.
Yeah, just one quick comment or follow-up, because as you said, both P&Zs went through extensive, long time, many year process in terms of working together, in terms of coming up with the Aspen Area Community Plans. And it was a joint effort, collaborative effort that involved not only city land but also county land. But I was a little surprised to note that even after all that collaboration and knowing that the way we adopt the plan, it's just sort of an advisory plan. It's not become statutory. The city's a little bit different. But then I read one of your comments here that in regards to working on the Western Maroon plan, that the city doesn't believe it's appropriate for the county to make land use recommendations for any parcels within city jurisdiction. But again, we're only doing recommendations. So I don't know if that was too strong a statement, or I just wondered if you can comment on that.
I'm happy to comment on it, and anybody else is as well. The city, my understanding from the city was that they had worked so diligently and had other priorities, after the Aspen Area Community Plan, that the county would take the lead on this joint jurisdictional plan. As you know, and as you mentioned, the city planning process is somewhat different than the county. The county relies on more of a physical-based land use planning, where we actually go out, we've walked the properties, we've analyzed the properties from kind of a height and zoning and setback perspective on a bigger picture scale. The city's work often entails going straight to a zoning process where they then take the parcel and develop the use of the property based on a more immediate process. They don't have the land use designations, if you will, the way that the county approaches it. So the approach is a little bit different, which sometimes is a rub as far as implementation. And I think the city's concerns are that they not be bound by a plan that they don't have flexibility with in the future when they come down to their site-specific planning. So there's some of that that has changed through the years. Since the early 90s when we were doing more joint planning together, I think some of that process has changed. The city has since adopted an ordinance by which they say that if there's any change in a piece of property that the city has, that, you know, they can't make a change as significant as an overlying master plan to that, because it changes the values of that property and the way that property is seen. So they approach it a little bit differently than we do. And so I think there's some of that interpretation, and I think that there's some, unfortunately, they didn't have the time to really be as involved in the process. So I'm hoping that once we refer the plan out and get a little bit more input, that we'll see where there's some common interests. I can't help but believe that the common interests are there when it comes to the scenic approach to the entrance to Aspen, which is huge, and we spent a ton of time on that scenic part of this land use plan. Ton of time. It was a lot of fun, but we did, you'll see the whole back section of that is it's visual planning for the entrance to the area. Also working along with the CDOT recommendations out of the highway corridor, as well as the access control plans to try to ensure that transportation is funneled better and the most efficient that we can in what we know is a very congested area, with the distinction of development of new intersections, different turn motions, that type of thing that came out of the access control plan, incorporating that into the future land uses that are going to occur along that corridor. As we know, you've just been through a huge amount of work with the airport, how all that works, how that transportation flows on the highway, how those setbacks work, the scenic aspect of that, the continuation of commercial development on the other side of the highway with the Airport Business Center, extensive build-out scenarios of what that could be under existing zoning, should that change, should that not change. All those things were analyzed in this process. Buttermilk, as you know, coming up with their master plan, coming forward. And then that intermingling of the city jurisdiction and their ability to rezone their property to come up for new uses, that we think we have a pretty good handle on what those uses will be, but you know, those could change as well. So I think it's been an extensive amount of work. I think that, you know, we've analyzed it from the land use, the actual uses perspective, how that relates to transportation, not only traffic from a vehicle perspective, but pedestrian connections throughout the corridor, the visual from the pedestrian perspective as well as from the highway perspective, and then the ease of movement. All of that has been looked at. When you go through the plan and you see all of the action items and implementation steps, I think they're really well thought out, but if you have additional things that you can think of, you know, we'd love to hear it, because we're going to meet again on the 20th, take your comments into consideration, and then hopefully get a final draft out that we will send out to the referral agencies.
If I could, I'd also like to point out we had a significant amount of input and involvement from most of the major property holders along the corridor, the airport, and their representatives were there at many of our meetings. John McBride and the people from the ABC were there. We had the people at the Inn at Aspen and Ski-Co there for a number of meetings. So this plan was developed with input from most of the property owners along that corridor.
Okay. So are you just looking for feedback, or want to cover some of the high points, or?
We thought we'd walk through those major points with you if you'd like, but if you've already read through them and don't have comments, we're happy to just take whatever comments you'd like to give us.
I think what we were trying to do is avoid finalizing a plan and presenting to you as a fait accompli, and then having you say, oh, this doesn't represent our vision of this at all.
Okay, Rachel?
George, given that we only have about 40 minutes on this, and, it's relatively short, it's not the full plan, I think maybe just discussing the points rather than a full walkthrough would give us more time among the board.
Okay. So do we want to take this one at a time and just see if there's any comments as we work through the first point? So the first point is the open space designation for the Burlingame Triangle parcel.
Yeah, we thought we'd jump into the most controversial right off the bat.
Yeah, just to help with a photograph. Is everybody familiar with where this parcel is located?
Could you point it out on the yellow map also?
It'll be very hard to see there, but see, John, where the hash marks begin? Yes, almost.
Let's see, where are we?
Warm.
It's just right adjacent to the business
No,
center.
down here.
No, we're down.
Yeah.
Am I? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's on this end.
It's adjacent to the Mountain Rescue
Yeah,
and the
it's
BMC
right-
West
Which
Park.
just over the fence from the Mountain Rescue, that little
Yeah.
piece.
And without, I don't want to blind draw, but on this photograph, here's the BMC parcel building. This is Highway 82 on the left, heading down Valley, BMC building, and buildings, I'm sorry. You can't really see any, Mitchell, I think it's back here. And then this is the bike path coming through across. And then the triangle piece, this is Deer Hill, heading up, going up. And there's a conservation easement as part of the Burlingame PUD in the city. This whole area is under conservation. But this triangle piece is located right there. I'll be quiet. I just wanted to make sure we all knew where it was.
It's a very small parcel, and we're kind of attuned to where it is because we've been looking at it for a year now. And because we've discussed it, I know that I stare at it every time I come up Valley. But basically, if you're coming from the airport, you are staring straight at it until the road makes a curve.
Rachel?
Yeah, I guess I have real concerns with this recommendation. And, perhaps some of that comes from being on the city side of the street when the Burlingame parcel was purchased. But for me, it really cues in heavily to issue number 6, which is the recommendation to start discouraging housing at the Airport Business Center and then clearly limiting any potential housing development of the BMC West parcel. And it just, I guess it starts to say to me, housing is either now going to be forced all the way into the city limits of Aspen only, or all the way outside of county limits, or maybe within BOCC, urban growth boundary. And that just strikes me as being such a conflict from the first AACP, which had a housing guideline that went all the way out to include Aspen Village, and then it was pulled back into essentially Shale Bluffs and just the Airport Business Center area, and now it's being pulled back in away from what we might say is the remaining housing parcel out there, the BMC West that the city bought that may eventually develop. And it just seems that we're superseding what will be the need for affordable housing going forward. We've been in an economic downturn and the pressures have been off, we all know that, but they certainly will return. And it just, to me, seems so close to the existing development. It really is part of the Airport Business Center, as I've seen it in the past. And so, to me, it's just starting to negate, do we really have affordable housing goals? Do we really intend to house 60% of our workforce remotely close to their workplace? And what are we doing on transportation and traffic and, the cost of labor and things like that? And so I see a real conflict with those recommendations.
I think one of the reasons that we ended up...
Jim, I think we want to take this opportunity just to provide you with comments
Okay.
first. Otherwise, we won't get through this. I think that this is really the goal of the meeting. And then you could take what you hear here and then sort of discuss it. John?
Yeah, and to build on what Rachel's saying, because I think there's a broader policy issue, there's also, as a practical matter, one of the things I'd encourage the board to think about as you form your comments back to Planning Commission is that this is property that's been annexed into the city, and so that is going to go through a planning and approval process within the city, probably regardless of what we do in our planning process, although I think it's good for the county to have considered and developed some thoughts about what our positions might be as those discussions move forward. But I would suggest that, if this is an area of some conflict right now that is causing the city to question the joint nature of the plan, that maybe making a final decision on it would be premature in this planning process versus laying out some principles and language in the plan that might guide our future comments as the city goes through its final planning process. So I would say that since this did start off with the intent of being a joint planning process, even though we haven't had the participation in that direction, that if this is an area of significant conflict, we probably should not make that decision now, but wait until such time as there's a process where an authoritative decision is going to be made and weigh in and be part of that discussion at that time.
Great, thanks. Other comments on this first issue? Rob?
I agree with that. It seems to me like the city is going to have some of the similar goals in terms of, the visual aspects of the entrance to Aspen. And the fact that this is a city parcel, they're going to weigh their goals towards best use, whether that, weigh the visual aspect and weigh the best use for meeting their employee housing goals. And it's really not our governance to say more than language that says, it would be nice for you to consider the goals of the entire entranceway, which are stated all throughout this plan in many different places. So it doesn't have to be stated specifically for this parcel.
Just a quick tag on, I had used the term before reserve zone, and maybe we should talk about things as being a reserve zone unless they're used for this purpose, and then these would be the guiding principles surrounding it. But, to be clear, when I was part of the city council, all those little trees out there were part of money the city expended to start landscaping the bike trail and landscaping that entire corridor after the road construction was going on out there. They did that whole trail. And so I think the city's very sensitive to what the entranceway looks like and has expended money to try to improve it, in advance of any development.
Steve?
Looking at the triangle, and I think on my Google Earth I'm seeing a triangle with, that would be where the development is, and it looks like it's a similar size to that Music Associates housing closer to Aspen.
Yeah, I can.
It's right there.
Yeah, just that little triangle
Thank you.
is not very huge. It's not going to be, when you compare it to the size of Burlingame, it's pint-sized compared to that. But it could be, some housing like that Music Associates housing farther along the highway. And I could see having that be beyond the edge of that triangle, that there would be absolutely nothing. The plan could say that there's nothing from there, so then you have the big block of open space.
but leaving that triangle for the last place that, keep it open for now, but if it gets down to there's no other places to put an employee housing thing and the city owns it, it is right next to the business center, and it's not going to look substantially different if one little piece of that were developed at some point. And I understand the open space idea of keeping, keep those big blocks of open space land in between open. But since that is right exactly next to the other stuff, it's not going to change it substantially if something were built there.
So I think I'm hearing, at least I like the idea of terms of wording this as sort of a reserve for looking for future uses based on some common goals.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's predominantly housing. That's what the city had purchased it for with open space, with housing money. So they're going to have a hard time doing anything else with it. And it is part of the potential of master planning the BMC West parcel to be a better parcel. That might be the playground or the trail area or something. Maybe the consideration of BMC West should have a heightened sensitivity to the significance of that area, and tie it in that way.
So it could almost be a park adjacent to the BMC housing if they needed some green space.
Yeah, I'm leaving it open. I'm not a designer, but.
Georgia, if I may, I just wanted to add one comment on behalf of our chair, John Howard, who wasn't able to be here last minute for today's meeting. But John was part of the Annie Mitchell co-op process in terms of allocating where the bulk and kind of massing and scale of the Annie Mitchell project would be. And he asked that I reiterate, just as we have this conversation, that Annie Mitchell was intentionally massed to the back with the goal of keeping this space open, the triangle parcel open as open space. And so John just felt it was important to reiterate that massing has occurred in terms of affordable housing goals when the project was conceived, and it was also conceived with that goal of an open space parcel and its initial intent. So just wanted to add that to the conversation with regards to housing.
All right, thanks. Okay, so based on our county manager's comments, we're going to bypass issue number 2 for right now. And we'll move on to issue 3, which is looking at the Sardi property. Should it remain outside the UGB and be designated as a residence or undeveloped open space on future land use?
Well, Alan's putting the map up. I think I'll just kind of introduce a little bit. Is that?
Sure.
You know where the Sardi parcel is. It's a 3-acre parcel that is beyond the snow dump in what is characterized as kind of a flat mesa above the river. And it has a single-family home on it today. The P&Z is recommending that use remain the same, but if in fact, if it changed, if it were to sell, it would be encouraged to be purchased as open space to extend the open nature of that plateau, which we just learned has been purchased primarily, by the airport and FAA funds. As it drops off the side of the hill, though, it is in a conservation easement and owned by Open Space and Trails. So there's a combination of conservation easement along the riparian and the bluff there area and the airport uses on top. If the property were to sell, we'd highly encourage it to go into an open space type of use without any uses. Not to confuse it with the fact that the Open Space and Trails organization would like to potentially put their administrative offices there. And Dale and I have gone around and around on many different parcels, and this is once again where unfortunately we don't feel it's appropriate given the uses on that bench. So the recommendation with the P&Z is that remain open or as a single-family use.
And again,
the AACP gives direction to define activity nodes where there is development and will be potentially redevelopment in the future, but then to maintain open areas between those nodes, for lack of a better word, nodes. And so this area, as you can see, you have the business center and the North 40 and some public facilities in this area. And then, as you can see, it really is, for the most part, open in this, beyond the snow dump until you come to the turn to go down valley at the Shield Bluffs. And so this was, again, just another attempt to try to maintain that open feel between the developed areas.
I support that recommendation.
Other comments? Michael and Steve?
I'm getting confused between what it's zoned for and what you want it to be. What's the difference?
It's currently AFR 10, which is one single-family home. It's only a 3-acre parcel, so it's a non-conforming size parcel, but its use is allowed to be a single-family use. No one on Planning and Zoning Commission felt that it was appropriate to rezone it to open space when you've got a private residential use of the property today, but highly encourage, if possible, for that property to come into open space hands. In the event that the owners choose to sell the property or convey an easement, in that case, we'd recommend an open space use. As long as there's a single-family residence on the property, that use, the plan does not preclude that use or recommend that it go away, but in the event that there's a change, the recommendation is to keep it open. From a visual perspective, it does recommend that the home be maintained as a low-scale home in nature, so that its visual impacts are not any greater than what we have today.
So I'm still a little confused. So if open space and trails were to acquire it, are you suggesting they demolish the house?
That would be ideal from an open space perspective.
Okay. Okay. So if it became public property,
Right.
the recommendation there is to demolish the house, but the zoning would say the same.
If it were purchased by open space, it would probably have a conservation easement on it, and the zoning would change to open space.
Do you mind follow up on that?
Yeah, it's non-conforming now, so this recommendation through the WAMP plan, does this inhibit their value for anything that they could potentially do? Because it's non-conforming now, so...
Only as far as the size of the property.
So, but I mean, if they wanted to rebuild a house,
They have the right.
they could do there with the same, whatever density they've got, I suppose, or
Yes.
however. So we're not inhibiting their property values through this recommendation. We're just saying that if we were to ever buy it, let's make it open space.
Right. And the scenic regulations that are in place today on the property are the Highway 82 Corridor Scenic Review, which we would have the ability to review today anyway for a new home on that property.
And the recommendation is that the county shouldn't buy this for any means other than open space, meaning, let's say we find this is a great place to store our, plows or whatever. The recommendation is, go spend your money elsewhere.
Well,
to
but this
do
is
that.
open space. It's not an
Yeah.
appropriate leap from an activity node
Yeah.
to another node of activity in the middle of open lands, which are admittedly airport operations, but open in nature.
Steve?
I know why the open space and trails would like to end up owning that property, because the old wagon road runs right through the property that is like a ready-made trail. It's already there, and it would add, be a big amenity to the trail system. I can't see using that building though for an administrative site at all, because put the administrative side at Public Works just down the road. And, I mean, I would see the house staying there and just being an employee housing unit for Picken County employee or something. It's a resource that's sitting there, and it would be a shame to demolish it. And we would still gain from the open space value of having that trail opened up.
I think the community development director.
Maybe the house could be moved to another location. It's another possibility, just to save the embedded energy that's in the house, to use it for a house.
So it sounds like everyone's comfortable with the current recommendations? Okay. The next issue is explore the creation of a transportation district for the WAMP area to ensure that development pays its way.
I didn't know what that meant. Would existing properties be pulled into a transportation district with some sort of annual mill levy or something? And who creates it? They would have to vote to create it themselves?
It's just one recommendation as far as a way to approach all the needs of the area. When we really got into it, and you guys might hop in, but when we really got into it, as you know, we're doing the underpass now, which we're very fortunate to have the funds to be able to make that happen. But there are highway crossings all along this planning area, everywhere from the senior housing today over at the Aspen Country Inn property. There's the Buttermilk interchange there at Owl Creek. There's a lot of need for improvements, if you will, not only with crossings, but trail connections and transportation in general that could be enhanced. And so I think that this just came out of as one means of looking at improvements for the area, that we can't always rely on CDOT funds.
If I could add in just that, Rachel, there's lots of different mechanisms for creating special districts and lots of different strategies that could be adopted, and you could start with creating a district on one parcel, which would just require a partition and then require annexation into it as part of a development approval, or you can go for the whole area that you want to capture and have folks vote. So there's lots of different mechanisms. I think that would be a detail that would get worked out, if the broader vision of, it makes sense that within this planning area, we'd look to have some kind of separate district as an additional funding mechanism to support the impacts of growth. But that could take a lot of different forms, just to clarify.
Well, I guess just to clarify for me, part of it is the term development pays its own way, because I'm fine with that, but it's too exclusive of the existing development, and the existing need, because everything you described there is about existing need. The senior center, Owl Creek Road, so on. And so it's really, in some ways, about, being able to improve transportation and connections in that planning area, not just about capturing new development. So that's kind of what was throwing me a little bit, although I fully agree with that. And the thing that strikes me is just going to be a challenge is when you got, your full 2% of sales tax already going to transportation, to BRT, through RAPTA, the remaining EOTC funds, how much do people feel they need to do an add-on tax of some sort, a program to fund this? I'd be the first to say I do understand the need. I mean, the city, I think, originally was having the Burlingame bus go all the way out to the ABC, and now I don't know that they do that anymore. And it just serves Burlingame and then comes back into town. And they found troubles financing that out of their existing sales tax for in-town transportation. So I'm okay with this because it's the word explore, the creation. And if we're exploring it, but we really, to my mind, need a little bit of a budget number as to how much is it going to cost us to, quote, explore something like that, and how feasible is it really. But if we're, certainly able to capture Buttermilk redevelopment and some things like that, BMC West redevelopment, our own airport redevelopment, and improve transportation there and services, I think that that's important. But it's going to be a really tricky wicket, I think, when people say, well, maybe it's extending the city's transportation sales tax out just to the ABC and to create some sort of small revenue source or something. But I'm okay exploring it, but I want to make sure we're exploring something that's feasible and we don't spend $75,000, looking at a transportation district that people would not implement.
Other comments? Michael and Steve?
Yeah, I mean, part of my problem with it is that, like Rachel, I didn't understand what it was talking about. So I think, although maybe transportation district is a term of art, but I think you really have to explain what you're talking about, which is sort of interconnectivity of the area more than transportation. We've got transportation, but it's just up and down. We don't have any lateral transportation, except now we might have an underpass, but it's really about sort of interconnectivity, because given the density out there, it's not a very good system. And we heard that when we were trying to place the underpass. Everybody wanted the underpass a little bit closer to them. And so I just think the language needs to be refined or explained, that's all.
And Rachel points out a really great thing too, because the plan would hope for an extended shuttle, because we understand that the movement between the airport business center activity area and town adds to so much of that congestion. And if we had a better shuttle system that was more convenient for those residents at certain times of the day and for the businesses at certain times of the day, I think we could get a lot of that congestion off of the highway. So that's part of it.
And several of the transportation improvements that are referenced in this statement, these statements are actually listed in areas throughout the plan. We actually make some specific recommendations for improvements. But that said, it would be helpful to be a little more clear in the statement as to what we're referring to.
And I think a lot of this came from an eye toward future development, particularly, the pomegranate and the Aspen Country Insight. If that were to be redeveloped, and you had greater density, there's no way to get across the highway there. There's a bus stop there. Yeah. But if people are coming from town, you've got to kind of rethink how the increased traffic to that site, if it were redeveloped, would get across that highway. And we just thought that if somebody redeveloped it, they should contribute somehow to the solution.
I agree. New but existing can't just piggyback for free.
Steve?
Yeah, I was going to point that out, that a lot of the transportation issues are actually for pedestrians, bicyclers, and cross-country skiers, because the Nordic Trail is going to come across the old Maroon Creek Bridge again and then empty out, so that connection from there to the Maroon Creek Golf Course trails is part of the whole transportation mix. But I think the word transportation confuses it, because it's almost more,
Oh, okay.
it's not as much vehicular things as pedestrian and bicycle.
Multifaceted, basically. Yeah. Okay, good. Let's see. Issue 5 is the scenic guideline limitations on structure height.
I don't know how much we want to discuss this any longer, but I think that I felt this is important to bring up to the board just because of your concerns about developability of some of the properties, that there's a recommendation to keep lower heights within the first 200 feet off of the highway. And when we had our initial discussion, and I can't remember, it's probably been at least 6 months ago, there was concern specifically, again, with the properties that were in the city. I think everybody enjoys the low scale of the Airport Business Center properties, and that has carried to be true through to the North 40 fire station and beyond. Everything's a little lowered in that area, so it's a nice corridor without a lot of structures right up to the property boundaries. The concern was, are properties still viable as more dense properties if we're taking away some of the height on the property. So we did put together a map, it's behind John, that shows in blue, it looks like the river, but it's the highway. And what we tried to do is show that first yellow line shows the first 100 feet off of the highway as it is today. And admittedly, we don't have the specific right-of-way boundaries shown there. So that's a little caveat here that those boundaries vary along the highway, but we just took the 100-foot strip, and then the 200 is the orange outer strip, so that goes back into the 200 feet. So we just wanted to show you approximately where that would land on some of those properties. And when you're looking at the properties like Mountain Rescue is pretty much all the way into that, and we've already seen those reviews, but the next one up, the BMC property that wraps around, we just wanted to show that there's quite a bit of property beyond that 200-foot mark that the recommendation is that the height be whatever the underlying zone district allows for. It's just that first 200 feet off the highway to kind of try to keep things lower in scale to give that approach as a scenic relief, if you will, from a lot of density right up on the highway. So we just wanted to explain that.
So where is the inn at Aspen? Is that outside the 200 feet or within?
Currently, it's within 200 feet, but outside of the 100 feet. And very specifically, I think the plan recommends that we look at allowing it to gain some height as it goes back. That property is constrained just because of some easements. There are some swaps of the easements with the ski company and the Inn at Aspen, and they have always hoped to jointly work together on those properties, and maybe one day it'll work. But right now, there's 93 different owners at the Inn at Aspen, and the ski company's got its own needs to move forward. So that property itself is a little more constrained, but it does have some relief as you go farther back. And the idea in terms of the use of that property is to bring that more into conformance, because once again, that property is non-conforming use in the zone district. It's a property that's zoned AF R10, which is a single-family house basically. It's never been zoned. Back in the 70s, the idea, late 70s or early mid-70s, was that all those uses along the corridor would go away. The Board of County Commissioners at the time had said, let's remove all those uses. It's not appropriate to have these uses outside of the urban core. But back in 1978, there was an exemption from abatement by the commissioners at that time to say, it's okay, you can stay, but you just can't grow. So I think the new thought is, it's not going away. It's a lodge use is appropriate, so let's acknowledge that it's okay to have a lodge use there, but to, once again, think about it from the visual scale as we move forward. So the plan says let's explore some potential rezoning for that property so that it can move along and be a little bit more viable as a lodge operation, but that we don't want it to get out of scale, although.
So within that, it's inside the 100 feet, but
the 200 feet.
Outside, so would it have the ability to, if that property wanted to redevelop or the ski company wanted to do something, to go up to 3 stories according to this, or no?
I have to go to this plan specifically and look, because
Anyway,
each section has its own setback.
Just in terms of a comment, I would like to see how flexible that is, because I think it may be an appropriate use to allow an additional story. I wouldn't want to see a 4 or 5 story, but depending on how it's architecturally designed and where the setback is, to allow perhaps a variance on that if needed.
And
It was 30.
we had some input from the people at Inn at Aspen. They came up and they said, here are short-term ideas for this and long-term. And I think what we did is we raised the height a little bit in the report based on their input. And we also talked about it being tiered as you go back toward the site, so it's lower at the front and it could be higher at the back.
Basically varying the roofline elements to continue to have open views of the ski area behind the structure and avoid obstructing and or breaking the ridge lines or structures is one of the major concerns in that area. But then we do have specific, let's see, maintain a setback of a minimum of 110 feet from the Highway 82 right-of-way, maintain existing height of 19 feet within the first 200 feet of the right-of-way, allow height to increase to 28 to the midpoint and 33 feet to the pitch of the roof, which is substantially higher than they have today.
What page are you on there?
Page 61, Chapter 3.
So that would allow perhaps a three-story building, given that height variance?
On the back of the
It
site.
says allow height to increase, to the 33 pitch of the roof
Okay.
when located more than the 300 feet from the Highway 82 roof. So it's got more of that step back.
All right, Michael, Rob?
I mean, we're running short on time here, but...
Michael's up, then Rob.
I'm sorry.
One of the things that came up when we had the review of the mountain rescue was the setback, which we just blew off. But the density of the landscaping in those corridors. There was, we put high the applicant put in lots of, and then the P&Z said, well, you got to thin that out. So I think you've got to clarify what you want to see in terms of landscaping within those setbacks. And do you want the landscape to curve up, or do you want it to block, or what do you want?
And we have.
So
There's a significant description of landscaping and what we feel is appropriate, and it tends towards something that looks more natural than something that's just a wall in front of your face.
We've tried to be very specific in each one of the activity nodes, not only with the setback and heights and that sort of thing, but with the landscaping, and also tried to give the visuals with many photographs outlining what we note as good and what could be improved if properties were to redevelop. So that's pretty well outlined in the photograph section, which is Chapter 3 of the plan, which has more of the scenic guidelines. And these are guidelines. They're not hard and fast code. The board, with any of this, is going to have an opportunity when code amendments come through to say if you think these are appropriate measures or not, when you have the specific legislation in front of you. And we intend to implement as quickly as we can, bring back some scenic overlay guidelines for you, scenic overlay regulations for you to look at, which will embody this, and you can, at that point, determine whether or not it's appropriate land use code amendments.
And keep in mind that a lot of what we're doing is, for all these things that come before P&Z, our purview is to evaluate whether or not it conforms to the master plans for each of these areas, and then we make a recommendation based on that, but the final say is yours.
Rob?
I guess, given the fact that we're short on time, I'd just like a better explanation of this the next time we go around, because 28 feet for the Inn at Aspen outside the 200-foot from the highway, 28 feet on a three-story house is, a three-story inn is, 7.5-foot floors, basically, when you take out the beam structures and that sort of thing. I mean, I can't think of a hotel in Aspen that can sell a 7-foot floor. I mean, that's lower than these ceilings. And I'm just not sure, I mean, I understand we want to limit the view, but that's at the base of a ski mountain. I think there's a way to kind of work to a better middle ground there. And I'd also like to see how this 200-foot line affects the entire corridor, because I'm assuming that we're not just talking about this section here. This is 1/3 of the WAMP plan here. It goes all the way down to the Maroon Creek Bridge and all the way up, well, the end of the airport doesn't really, there's not more beyond that, so. And I don't know what the 100-foot line is that we're talking about. The only mention I see is the 110 feet as a minimum setback, but you drew a 100-foot line in there, and I'm not sure why that's drawn in there.
110 is because that's where the existing structure is.
Just on the Enid Aspen parcel.
Yeah, which you need.
That's on the Enid Aspen
Yeah.
parcel, but
Very
what's the
specific.
yellow there? Why is there
100.
100-foot, so there's a 100-foot setback everywhere else? Or no? You're
Yeah.
just showing us what 100 feet looks like.
We're showing you what 100 feet looks like.
There's
and
nothing
each
in this written in
activity-
100 feet.
Activity nodes are very specific in the design guideline recommendations.
But for the most part, the setback from the highway in this area, it varies depending on zone district, but a large majority of it is 100 feet from the highway, 100 feet back. And the plan recommendation is, in several areas, to extend that 100 feet to 200 feet, primarily to protect the visual view plane, the view plane as you drive down the highway.
And it's
corridor.
hard for me to flip through this on here,
Yeah.
but I guess I'd like to see exactly what nodes are, you know, what nodes have what setbacks.
And we invite you, any of you individually, to, Ellen and I are happy to walk through any portion or all of the plan with you, so that you'll have a better understanding of all the specifics. But just to wrap up, I know you're busy, but just to wrap up with this, is that I think that the Planning Commission did an extraordinary job of looking at each one of the nodes individually to really give a sense of what works and flows throughout the entire corridor from a visual perspective as well as a use perspective, and took all of those competing interests and did, the hard job of saying, okay, where do we balance out those competing interests?
Rachel?
Yeah, we were presented this as a kind of 6 issues to talk about. We got through 5 of those, that's not too bad. But a couple of comments on issue 6, which we're not going to get into. I really would like to have some sort of survey of what level of remaining service, commercial, light industrial function we really have there. Maybe you've done that research, but it seems to me it's becoming more of the real estate and attorney office and professional offices. And I really don't know that, quote, limiting housing development is what is going to keep it service, commercial, industrial. And I have hesitation on that. It's kind of like it's become half and not half or a third into a residential area, and then to support transportation and things like that, you need a certain residential density. And it was 10 or 12 years ago, the BOCC said, yeah, we're going to allow more heights for affordable housing in those areas. At least that was my impression from talking to some of the commissioners at the time. So this seems to be a reversing pace, and so I have some hesitancy on that one. I just am not sure it's not going to turn into all the professional offices of downtown. It won't be retail commercial, but it'll be other types of commercial, and it's not going to be light manufacturing or the service commercial much longer. And how do we really keep that? I don't know if just getting rid of housing keeps that, and maybe there's other components of that. The other is just, on the whole buttermilk issue, which we didn't really talk about as a separate thing other than these setbacks, is, where does it fit into the larger lodging discussion, and how can we perhaps incentivize more of appropriate lodging development there, as opposed to say, well, here's our height limitations, try to work out a good project within that, and hope that we get something good. I just was at the whole mountain biking trails development program presentation, and there was a lot of discussion, hey, what a great hub this would be for summer activities, to take the different trails up to the different areas, and how does that lodging discussion in general with the AACP fit into Buttermilk, and do we offer incentives for the right projects as opposed to these are the guidelines to try to fit in it?
I'm going to give us maybe 5 more minutes, but Rachel, opening up issue 6, and just to see if there were any other board comments. A recommendation to maintain the service, commercial, light industrial function of the ABC and modify zoning to discourage new housing. So any other board comments on that?
and that's within the ABC property.
Within the ABC property.
Well, it just still becomes, oh,
Yeah,
last
let me,
comment.
let me just see if there's other board comments, Rachel, okay? You've had your
Sure.
share. Steve and Rob?
I think that the housing that is there it really adds something to the ABC, and I think we should keep housing there. However, something like the city of Aspen buying a commercial property and then wanting to convert it to housing, I don't agree with doing that, because they're taking something that was a valuable amenity to the community, and now it's gone, or will be gone, just for more housing. So in that respect, I'd say don't convert any commercial stuff to housing, but keep the housing that's there, and perhaps allow some more, because it really is a valuable employee housing area of the county.
Rob?
I think to some extent you have to look at the balance, because, I don't know, I view the AABC, the whole area out there, as a mix of use that creates benefit to the community for businesses that can't be downtown because of the cost of downtown. Yet we don't want to drive to Glenwood Springs to get X, Y, and Z. Yet at the same time, you've got the employee housing aspect that can't be downtown because of the cost of downtown. And here we can create potentially a certain density that's expected around I don't know if this is the right word, but an industrial type park next to the airport with services and housing that can be done at a lower cost out there. I mean, it's a perfect mix, that it's within the urban growth boundary, but far enough out of Aspen that the prices are lower than if they were in Aspen. And I know a tremendous amount of people that live out at the AABC, and they love that community for all of its benefits, whether they're in a small apartment or in a $1.3 million employee housing unit, freestanding house that are out there. So there's got to be a balance between those two. I'm not sure that that's a definitive statement.
Okay, I think we've covered everything. You have one quick comment?
Well, I was just going to say, if we looked at the commercial space that's out there now and calculated to our affordable housing standards and asked, well, how much affordable housing would have to have been created to build what we have now, it's probably less than what's out there. And if we're going to see additional commercial and encouraging additional commercial, we can't ask them to mitigate, but tell them put it in Aspen or put it in Basalt. I mean, so I just want to, it's back to that same balance question. But if we're going to have a 40%, 60% mitigation requirement on new commercial space, where are we expecting them to put it?
Okay, thank you.
If I could give that comment.
No, I think we're out of time, but this was your opportunity to hear our comments and take it back to your board for further discussion, so thank you so much.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you all for your work, yeah.
George, go on without me, I'll be back in a minute.
Okay, water and everyone went over? Yes, water. Just this, my water bottle.
John, we're on to MOI.
Yeah, so we've got quite a few people here for MOIs. The first MOI that we have up is a domain name and email change. I cannot see beyond the pillar there to see if John Lloyd and Sean Carey. John's not here. Oh, okay. We have Sean Carey here, who's been our project manager to help us through some of these discussions. But I'd like to turn it over to Sean to talk a little bit about where we're at. And there's John right now. John is just doing the introduction of the MOI for the domain name change. In essence, though, just to give you a little bit of background while folks are filing out, we've been in the process of analyzing cloud-based solutions for our email services. Our employee team has made a recommendation that we move the county to a Google-based system. As we make the move to a cloud-based system, it also affords us the opportunity to change our domain name to something maybe a little bit more easier to remember, easier for the public to use than the domain name that we're using now, which is basically a co.pitkin.co.us to something much simpler. So, John, I'll turn it over to
And
you.
just let me interrupt for a second. We've got about 45 minutes to go through a slew of MOIs and future agendas and et cetera, so we'll need to sort of keep these topics moving along.
Well, really, you've said it all. Well, the idea is to provide a URL that makes it easier for people to use, not so difficult to type in, particularly on small remote devices. The change in the domain name goes hand in hand with the change to the cloud-based Google applications and email and calendaring. So it's a two-in-one kind of change. That's what we're looking to do.
So there's a couple of recommendations here. Your recommendation is go to pitkin.us. You've got a couple other ideas, and so here are comments from the board. Rob?
I guess, first a couple of questions. One, I'd be just curious in a minute or two to hear why Google as opposed to Outlook 360. And the other question I had in reading this was, are there security issues with either one of these that we should be concerned about as a government with documents on the Google site?
Well, to answer the security question first, Google is as secure as our current network and probably more secure, just based on its architecture and the way it's spread literally around the world. So security is quite good. The other question is, how do we choose Google Apps over Office 365? There's an employee group that was put together to look at the benefits of each side, the usability, the long-term potential, and they made, I think, what was the right conclusion is that as an organization, we can get more use and utility out of the Google products than we can out of the Microsoft Office 365, and it's a lot cheaper. Those are the biggest factors.
And just the last comment, my immediate reaction was, given cityofaspen.com, to go to pitkincounty.com, and it better defines what the website is. It's the county. And it's Pitkin County in specific, and I think people are just familiar with .com. If we had bought that domain, and I don't know what the answer to that question is. I've seen a nod from Phyllis.
All right.
We just bought that one, right? PitkinCounty.com, we just bought it.
Right. All right. Rachel?
So we're not talking about Pitkin County, Utah. I mean, that's the problem for me with just going to Pitkin, US, is we could very easily be confused with Pitkin County, Utah.
Is there a Pitkin County, Utah?
Yes, there is.
Interesting.
And I think there's some other Pitkin counties.
I don't think there is.
There's the city of Pitkin, and
There's the city of Pitkin.
there's Pitkin Parish in Louisiana. As far as we could tell, we were the only Pitkin County.
Maybe I'm mistaken, but I've heard those Utah delegates refer to themselves as coming from Pitkin, Utah before.
Well, while they're looking that up, other board comments? You like, don't like, other suggestions for the new domain? Steve?
Being technologically challenged and coming into this century finally, whatever is
Maybe it's
picked, as long as it's really user-friendly and easy to learn, I'm fine with it.
I think I was thinking of Garfield, Utah, similar to Garfield County. Sorry about that.
So for our individual domains, we would still use the beginning of it, which would be our names separated with a dot, so it would be george.newman@pitkin.us or pitkincounty.com.
Correct, and your existing email address would not go away. If people have that on record, it would still work.
We're trying to keep everything that would point to Picken County to make sure it doesn't get taken over by a website that we may not want representing us, and also for ease of access so that there's not a wrong necessarily door coming in. But we do need to choose a face that's going to be our primary domain name that we're going to put out there. The employee's recommendation is picken.us, I think because it was the simplest alternative.
Yeah, I mean, we are trying to simplify it, because right now, again, for the audience, if they don't know, it would be, my domain would be george.newman@co.picken.co.us. So there's lots of opportunities to have a fat finger on there and not go through. Other thoughts?
I kind of like the county being part of it, Picken County, but that's,
You got 2 for Picken County.
I think that would be easier for the public to remember. The
3 for
whole
Picken County.
Take longer to type in, but it's easier to remember.
Yeah, fundamentally, I think, I agree with switch over to Google. It's a minor, it seems to me, either way.
I always believe in the KISS theory myself, so I would keep it as simple as possible, but.
well, Picken CO would be Picken, either Picken, Colorado, or Picken County, however someone interpreted it, if you,
You can't
instead of long
you can't do Picken CO, because,
I don't think, well, the Picken .c, I think if you did Picken CO, we don't have that one right now. We don't know if that's available. I think we have pickencounty.com. We have picken.us. We've been trying to pick up the ones that are most likely iterations that people would use to make sure we own those. So we wouldn't even know if that would be available.
so I've got 3 for pickencounty.com. I would be for picken.us. Michael is ambivalent on that.
Well, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, I'm sorry. There we go.
Okay, so, and again, I think we just need direction. Is there any fall on the sword problem with going, if 3 of you seem to be going with pickencounty.com, it's a domain name that we own. It's a little more complicated, but it's, you know, it's also descriptive, it's easy to remember.
No problems.
Okay.
pickencounty.com.
Okay. All right. Unless there's any other discussion on Google or questions on, good, real quick, if folks are using like Outlook at home, are they going to be able to load Google right into that Outlook? Like
Yes.
their Google accounts here? Okay. So they'll sync up calendars and emails and that sort of thing if
Yeah.
somebody's using their own device.
Or they can just go through their
For the
browser.
record, I'm not, I'm just, I know a lot of folks do though. Okay.
You'll help us with that.
We'll provide a lot of training, yes.
Okay.
Okay, well, I mean, can the staff live with that? Because the staff did recommend Picken US. I mean, what
Oh,
was
I
it?
think the staff can, I don't think any of these were falling the sword. It was, we felt that that was the simplest one and it's going to be easiest to remember, but I don't think there are any
They're all
fall on the sword
equivalent.
kind of issues.
In
Yeah.
terms of the technology, it doesn't matter what we use. They're all equivalent.
Okay, great, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item that we have up, and there are a few folks who will probably want to talk on this one. We have an update on our wildfire mitigation program. So Jerry, I think I saw and is behind the pillar here. We've got a few slides. I did email those out this morning. Some of you probably had a chance to pick them up during the meeting, some not.
Okay, and again, Jerry, we'll need to sort of move through this.
We will.
Jerry, do you want to go ahead and just...
Yeah, I'll go ahead and just get started here while we're trying to get that together.
So what we have is wildlife mitigation update, Jerry Peets?
Jerry Peets,
Jerry Peets.
Picken County Wildfire Mitigation Coordinator. Real quick, I just want to introduce the people that are here with me. We've got Will Dolan from the City of Aspen, Utilities Project Coordinator, Parker Lathrop, Aspen Fire Department Deputy Fire Marshal, Cindy Hoban, Picken County Community Development Director Susan Pearson, the Picken County Zoning Officer, and Travis Elliott, City of Aspen Management Analysis Intern. And these guys, before I got here, have been laying the groundwork for some of the projects up here that we've been talking about, so it's been a huge help. Just to summarize what I've done probably since the last time I gave you an update is we've just been making a lot of presentations. Snowmass Capitol Creek Caucus, Ridge of Red Mountain HOA, Shieldo Terrace HOA, the Frying Pan Caucus last night, Starwood HOA this morning, and this has been in conjunction with the City of Aspen, Community Development, Aspen Fire, and the BLM has been showing up to some of these meetings. So as a result of these, we've done lots of wildfire assessments for people out there, the 4 fire districts, and 2 potential projects have come to light and we're planning them. The Shieldo Terrace one, we're meeting tomorrow with them, Snowmass, Wildcat Fire, Basalt Fire, and the BLM out of Windstar, and we're going to identify some mitigation priorities and fundings at that meeting. Red Mountain, as you know, has been identified as a high-risk area, and I've got a slide here that just kind of illustrates that, what we look at in high risk. Weather, topography, and fuels. So weather, coarse wind drives fires, temperature, humidity, and precipitation all are a factor of how dry the fuels are. Topography, flat or steep slopes, fire doesn't burn as quickly or as intensely on a flat slope as it does on a vertical slope. Aspect is huge, north, south, east, or west facing. Your south and southwest facing slopes tend to dry out quicker and they have more flammable types of vegetation on them. And then the fuels, finer, heavy grasses as opposed to continuous oak brush or pinyon juniper. The fuel arrangement and continuity is basically the density of it, if it's laying down or if it's close to the ground or if it's vertical. And then of course the fuel moistures, which is how dry they actually are. So on Red Mountain, several of these things play in. The slope definitely plays in. It's a southwest facing slope. It's got both fine and heavy fuels, and the arrangement continuity is thick in most places, and the fuel moistures are way down. And just an example, I'm sure you saw the fire that erupted in Glenwood Springs last night. I could barely imagine they would have a wildland fire with what we thought was precipitation and low humidity, but it's the same situation there with the slope and the fuels and the aspect. Just next photo. This is the Panorama Fire, July 31st, 2004. This is an example so we all remember what fire looks like in those types of fuels. In this picture, we've got exactly the same fuel types as you have on Red Mountain. 40 to 100 foot flames on this fire. It was not wind driven. There was no wind that day, and it was on a fairly level slope. It actually created its own weather and pre-dried the fuels in front of it to create this situation. The next photo, same thing, Panorama Fire. You can't really see that flame front down underneath the clouds, but the scenario that would play out on Red Mountain is kind of worst case scenario, catastrophic fire moving across Red Mountain or up Red Mountain. Now, there wasn't too many homes up there during this fire. We had several destroyed, but if you had this type of flame front moving across or up Red Mountain, throw in 60 homes, a few hundred people, narrow roads, one way in and out, and pretty much recipe for disaster there. So we get to the Red Mountain easements, and like I said before, the folks behind me have been in touch with Holy Cross over several months and working on efforts to work within their easements to create fuel breaks. So on September 2nd, Holy Cross begins a maintenance project that they're required to do to remove hazardous trees along their easement, their power line easement, and we'll get to that map later. And we've got on board with them to try to coordinate some efforts and create some fuel breaks in this area. So we've been in discussion with them, and prior to the beginning of this, if we can get this thing off the ground, because it's kind of happened fairly quickly at this point, there would be outreach to the residents, the affected residents in the area, just to let them know, what we have planned and what's going on. It's really nothing new to them. Holy Cross does this on a cycle of about every 5 years. And Aspen Fire and Holy Cross would be going out and reaching out to the residents and letting them know what we have planned. So, generously, Holy Cross has agreed to remove additional hazardous vegetation within these easements, and I'll describe them in a second, the specifications of them, to create more fuel breaks, and we would follow the Colorado State Forest Service guidelines for fuel breaks. And that's something probably Parker from Aspen Fire and I would be on site to actually decide what comes out and what doesn't. So, nobody will just be on their own doing this. So if you saw the slides previously, just to define what a fuel break is, what it isn't is elimination of all the fuels. It's rearranging the fuels, creating an open park-like area, a mosaic of fuels, that works well to tie in with existing roads, rivers, power line easements in this case, and what it does for fire suppression is create an anchor point. And anchor points for wildland firefighting is where everything starts. You start at where the fire started and you flank it and work out from there. So this creates a good, safe area to work off of from the very beginning. So we have a couple of examples of what fuel breaks look like. In this picture, if you could imagine, that would be a 25-foot wide power line, and those are low-lying shrubs and Gamble's oak and a few trees in there. We're reducing the fuel density, not eliminating it. It's not a bare strip of land. Next one. This is a before and after picture of what fuel reduction looks like. On the left there, obviously, we've got a home that's made of combustible materials buried in fuels, and after they've come through and mitigated that property, you can see the difference between the amount of fuel, which would reduce the intensity of the fire and slow it down or stop it. We can get to the map now, and if I can use this pointer without hitting anybody with it. This is the Hunter Creek easement A, and this is a combination of the city of Aspen and Holy Cross, and it goes from basically the pump house about 3/4 miles down to the Ruby property. Parker, I don't know what road that is there.
That's a private driveway.
Private driveway. That's 25 feet wide is their easement, and like I said, about 3/4 mile long. The next one is the Salvation Ditch B here, and it runs just below Salvation Circle off Red Mountain Road, almost a mile over to here, and it's below the Salvation Ditch, or just skirts the Salvation Ditch, and it's at the boundary of the Ridge of Red Mountain Homeowners Association property line. Those are the two areas, and again, 25 feet wide. What we would plan on doing there is what you saw in the slides, removing the density of the fuel, but not eliminating it totally. So what Holy Cross has provided, and this is a real unique opportunity because it doesn't come around very often, and it's a huge cost-saving opportunity to the county and the city because they're providing a lot of the manpower. They're also going to provide a chipper to either broadcast the material that we cut out back onto the landscape, or they're willing to take it to the landfill. And as I understand, we would be waiving landfill fees if we did that.
Yeah, well, we've talked about if chipped materials are coming in that we don't have to process, we put those right into our composting for wildfire mitigation.
But what they are requesting is some assistance to do this. Most of their manpower is going to be doing their stuff, and then their sawyers will be cutting some of the stuff we want done. But they'd like to have a 4 to 6 man crew to assist in moving the cut vegetation up to the chipper, hauling it up and down the hill, or getting it to the trucks for disposal after they chip it up, getting it to the landfill. So the city of Aspen and Aspen Fire have been exploring funding for this additional manpower needed, and the project is expected to take 2 to 3 weeks, and it's starting on September 2nd. So I don't know, Parker or Will, if you guys want to quickly describe your funding efforts for this?
On the Aspen Fire side, we're still, like Jerry said, exploring the funding options. What we had set aside this summer was for wildfire mitigation assessments. The money that wasn't spent, we're looking if we can repurpose that and use it for actual mitigation efforts. But that's still in our early stages, and we're looking at how we're going to fill that manpower. Since we do come from a volunteer department, on the department side, we do have to look at other means of getting people out there besides the volunteer work.
The city has authorized spending funds on this particular project for this year. So I guess we can take priority easement A there, start with that, sort of take that as our test case and see how it goes. But the city has secured some funding for this, and we're willing to provide that to the working group.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
No, but you're about 2 minutes here.
Are
you all done with your presentation?
I'm done,
Oh,
unless
perfect.
Susan or
Just enough-
Cindy has anything else to add to this.
So any questions? Steve?
The thing I'm really concerned, up a place like Red Mountain, is the single road going in and out with some tight corners on some of it, and is there any possible way to escape route out of there that people could go on in the vehicles?
I can answer that question. We do run these situations with our neighborhoods where it's one way in, one way out. That's why we look for areas of refuge. On top of Red Mountain, like we have Wexner's big green, very lush, well-manicured meadow. So if we can't send people down, we can send people up into an area they can wait it out. That's also something we want to speak with the county about later, is looking at Red Mountain Road and trying to improve all the easements up there just to make it that much more friendly. Because for the longest time, the kind of wildfire kind of got pushed to the back burner. But what's happened in recent years is kind of bringing it forward. We want to make sure we look at Red Mountain as it's not just homes, but each one of those homes has employees almost. So each home is a business. So there's a ton of people up there every day. So we have to look at it, the bigger picture than just residents. It is a very well populated area during the daytime. And that's the time it would be seeing wildfire.
Okay. Well, good work. Thank you very much.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks.
Okay, our last item on MOIs is a budget supplemental for the detox services. What this really reflects is when we built our 2013 budget, we built it around the contributions that the county would be making directly. As we got into the negotiations and actually ramping up the detox, the county agreed to be the fiscal agent to run the funds from the other participating agencies. What this budget supplemental does is really recognize that those funds, the funds from really Basalt, Snowmass, and Aspen Valley Hospital will come to the county for almost a single payer to Colorado West. The city had already gone ahead and written their check for this year directly to Colorado West. So we're taking care of it for the rest of the entities. So it's a no net change, really. The revenues and expenditures would equal each other. We have Connie here. I don't think Nan had an opportunity to make it over.
That's fine.
So any questions from the board?
So there is a no net change to the county. Is there shifting of funds between the Healthy Community Fund and the general fund?
Not
New.
Not new, yeah. We had approved a $75,000 general fund expenditure to support getting it. That's all the same. The additional appropriations are covered 100% by the other entities writing a check to us.
And these were the stand-up costs for our first year of operation. Are we anticipating that they'll be about the same for next year or
We're
less?
anticipating they'll be about the same. Right now, they are, we still have to have a lot of discussions around this. In our financial reports that we've received, they seem to be running ahead, but what they've communicated to us is that next year we should not expect to go above the $238,000 that it did cost to get it stood up this year. We're still having discussions with both Colorado West and our partners about how that funding is going to be handled in upcoming years.
There's really no action required?
Well, on this, we need to adopt the budget supplemental just so we can accept the dollars from the municipalities and make the payment to Colorado West.
Okay, everyone okay with that? Steve, you have a question?
On the chart, it shows Aspen Valley Hospital, Snowmass Village, and Town of Basalt's contributions are being taken out. Does that mean, but yet they're still partners, does that mean, I don't know what that means. Are they not contributing any money this year now, or what?
No, they're actually, so the revenue is showing up. You have a expenditure, and then you have, the revenues are showing up as a negative.
The revenues are showing as negatives that offset the expenditures.
Yeah. So that is their, so they will be writing us a check for $52,000 and $3,000 and $2,500 respectively.
Are we tracking where the causes of the, not just where somebody lives, but where they were that evening, or,
That is proving to be more difficult information to really track in our process, but what we have done is we've agreed in principle to try and build a model around three metrics. One is population, the other is the number of liquor licenses issued, and then the third is utilization, so who's the referral agency. And so right now, the hospital is actually referring more folks than anyone else through the first two quarters, followed by Aspen, Basalt, followed by Aspen, Picken County, Basalt, and Snowmass being last. And so we're looking at some combination of those three things. So it's that utilization number that we're trying to get at that question with.
Okay, very good.
All right, everybody okay with that? Okay, thank you, Connie.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so that's MOIs. We're going into future agendas.
And if need be, I can save my open discussion items till tomorrow time. Few future agenda items, just a reminder, August 20th, because of the Pro Challenge race and the difficulty folks would have getting into town, we did cancel our meeting that day. Do have a couple questions for you. We have been trying to schedule time, some workshop time to bring the recreational marijuana rules and issues back to you. We had a preliminary discussion. And we have, quite honestly, we've been filling up now. We've gotten into our busier time of the year. But we do have a couple of opportunities. First, on Thursday, August 29th, you guys are scheduled to come in the afternoon for a special meeting on abatement hearings, as well as for the EOTC. We're wondering if we might be able to tack on a longer work session to talk about recreational marijuana on that day, up to 2 hours. We may not need that much time. We may narrow it down. But if we could maybe come in the morning at either 10 or 11, 10 if you want a lunch hour, or 11 if you want to work through lunch, so that we can talk about our recommendations and such. We also may have fewer abatement hearings as we get closer, and we could use some of that afternoon time, but wanted to check in and see if we could use, since you're going to be here anyway.
Board?
I had already put forward that I'm not going to be there on that day. I said that before I left in July. That is going to be a meeting with QQ and the new director of the Colorado Water Conservation Board down in Denver. Not saying you can't have the discussion, but I won't be a part of it.
Does that date work for
I'm around.
Michael?
I'm checking.
Checking, okay. Is there another, what's a second choice? Is there a second choice?
Well, we've got a couple. I was looking at September 11th. Let me get there. Which is actually a Wednesday. It's a regular meeting day, but right now we have a very light agenda. And in the past, we've used some of our regular meeting time when we've had it to cover work session items, so we can look at September 11th.
I would prefer that if we're all going to be here.
Yeah, we could just maybe reserve out an hour and a half, 2 hours there, depending on what we think we need. And that would be a time when you guys would probably be around too. We have a light agenda right now.
That sounds like that could work, unless for some reason that fills up in the next week or so.
The land use is what we need to double check on, but
Yeah.
I think we can manage other items.
Okay.
So we'll look at September 11th first.
Okay.
And then the other, and Michael, this kind of runs afoul of ACRA, but I was hoping to be able to set aside some time on September 24th at 10, but I believe that runs into your ACRA meeting, just in case we need one last workshop before we have to adopt. We have to have rules, an ordinance adopted by October 1st. September 24th would give us, one more work session time if we needed it. But I believe that's an ACRA meeting day. And so I guess I'd be asking if you'd be willing to make an exception at that point if we met at 10 if we had to, on recreational marijuana. It may not be necessary after September 11th.
I made an exception for the last ACRA meeting, so I don't think I'll make an exception for this one.
Would the courthouse plaza remodel conceptual designs be something that might be able to be moved off that meeting of the 24th if we need another meeting?
We could always do a working lunch too, bag lunch.
Or a working lunch.
Yeah.
It looks like on October 1st, we've got some gaps in there that we can move perhaps the plaza design over to.
Yeah, we could probably do that if we need it. So we'll focus right now on at least getting September 11th and then seeing what our needs are after that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's really all I have for you on future agendas.
The only thing I have a question of, and you can check, it's on Tuesday, September 17th, our joint meeting with Open Space. We have an hour for exec, and then we move into the regular meeting. So you can check with Dale and just sort of see if an hour is going to be adequate. I don't know what else they may have to discuss with us that may take some time. I can think of one property that may take some time.
Okay.
So
we'll check on that.
Shift it around within the time period. Makes sense.
anybody else have anything for Michael?
I won't be here on the 3rd of September.
Anybody else have anything on future agendas? Okay. See, we're scheduled for a break right about now, and we've got the school board coming in at 3:30, so perhaps we could hold off on your open discussion items till tomorrow?
Yeah.
So we'll take a 15-minute break, and maybe, John, we can reset up the room
Reorganize
for...
a little bit. Yeah, I'm going to move myself. We'll clear off this side. We may need to crunch a little bit, put a
Yeah.
few more
Okay.
chairs in.
Okay.
Okay, we have a joint meeting, an annual joint meeting with the Aspen School Board, so welcome.
Thanks.
Glad to have you here. I don't know if you know everyone, but maybe we'll just go around the room really quickly, just introduce ourselves.
Great. Yeah, you've got some new members since we met last time.
Rachel Richards, welcome. Ken, I'm Elizabeth Parker, and I've been on the school board for 7,
8,
12 years, so I'm term limited, so I'll be going off in November.
And I'm Sandra Pierce, and I am starting my 3rd year of my first term.
I'm Charla Belinsky, and I, like Elizabeth, I'm rolling off in November, so after almost 8 years.
And I'm John Moore, I'm superintendent of schools.
And we're missing, just so you guys know, before you go on there, we're missing Bob Glay and Sheila Wills from our board, who are out of town today. So.
I'm Rob Ittner, County Commissioner.
George Newman.
Mike Owsley. And Steve Child.
So again, welcome. Thank you. It's always good to have this annual meeting with you and touch base and look at sort of common areas of concern and how we can work together with each other moving forward. And we put together an agenda.
Yeah, and so I think this was a combination of items that we got from you, I think mostly from the school board, and I think one additional one from us, or maybe one or two. I know we're interested in what's happening with the enrollment numbers and your finances in general, which probably sets up our discussion for the Senate Bill 213.
Perfect.
So if we can turn that over to you just to talk a little bit about
Yeah, well, just to reiterate too that I always think it's such a great opportunity for us to, collaborate and discuss different things, and I don't think any of these issues were, burning issues that we said, oh, we need to really get that on the agenda, but more just a conversation and to keep you guys aware. So this is some information that our CFO, Kate Fuentes, gave us. You can see the trend from 2000 to 2012, and I just circled those things in the middle and at the end to sort of give you a glance at the last 5 or 6 years. But you can see that we are definitely growing. The first one is AES, which is Aspen Elementary School, and then you go down to the middle school and the high school. And so at 2007, I circled there 508, and we've grown to, what does that say? My eyes aren't that good.
529.
529 or 528. And then at AMS, it's from 447 to 467. And the high school is where we really have seen a lot of growth, and that's from 519 to 561. So I know that this year there's tipping the scale at close to 600, we've been told, at the high school, which is pretty high for us. So that's our building capacity is what, John? 550, 560?
Well, there's the difference between what is optimal for a good, sound educational environment, which is versus how many kids we can put in the school. We can get 600 in the school, but probably the optimum capacity is more like 525.
And it's interesting because it looks like when I look at your in-district and your out-of-district, you've got a fairly high percentage of out-of-district students. And I know over in years past, there's always been an issue in terms of sometimes you really are encouraging out-of-districts because you need the population. In other years, you are restricting them. So.
Well, we haven't been encouraging it for a number of years. You can see on here, too, it's dropped down from 400 in 2002 to 355 in 2006 to down to 311 this past year. So we've definitely been trying to get that number down. The percentage is down, way down from where it was. And not that we're trying to exclude out-of-district kids, but when your enrollment is going up within district kids, you have to, give them first priority, obviously. And, the last thing we'd want to do is start putting kids in, well, I think, I'm speaking for myself, but I mean, putting kids in modular buildings because we've accepted a lot of out-of-district kids when, with our own district kids, we need to, have the capacity. So anyway, so it's a great point, and it's something that we're really, as any parent who got the registration forms this past week will tell you, they're really cracking down on making sure that they verify housing and it's in district versus out of district.
We actually accept very few out-of-district students at elementary school now. I think we took one sibling or something. I mean, it varies a little bit year to year. But the figures on the left side of the chart reflect accepting out-of-district kids in kindergarten, you know, just to fill up the spots. And now we pretty much try to keep it right around 100. And most of the time, much of the time, there's no out-of-district students. So I think if you looked at percentage by school, the percentage of the elementary school would be much lower than it used to be. The percentage of the high school is higher because, partly because Aspen Community School now. Most of their students used to go to CRMS, and now most of them come to Aspen High School, and that's 10 to 12, 14 students a year.
The same is true with Aspen Country Day School.
Yeah, but Country Day, most of those kids have to live in district in order to go to our high school, so that wouldn't affect the percentage. But Country Day and Community School are two of the big reasons why we're now getting an additional 20 to 25 students a year from those two schools that we weren't getting in the past. And then family moving in, for middle school especially, we get families moving in.
I think that's something for us to just always stay in communication on too, and I think regarding enrollment, I mean, do you all track the growth of the county, like planning out years in advance, what you're seeing the growth trends being, or what you're looking at for the, one census to the next, that kind of thing?
Age demographics and those sorts of things, yeah.
I know from a historical point we do. I've seen obviously the census information and that kind of thing, but do you all project out, and how do you do that? What kind of resources do you use?
We typically, at the staff level, have been using resources either through the state demographer's office or the Headwaters Institute, which is different than the Headwaters. The river, there's a River Institute, and then there's another one that does socioeconomic profiles for counties and municipalities, and you can download a tool from them, but they're using primarily census data to do their projections, and I think both the demographer and these kind of resources are breaking it out by age and gender and then doing rolling averages as projections, and so it doesn't account for like the economic changes that we saw in the 2008, 2009, and how that affected some of our demographics. It's more difficult to capture those things, but we can certainly, I thought at one point I had shared those, but maybe it didn't come through. I'd be happy to share the reports that we're using. I don't know how accurate they'll be. It may be good to go back and see how well they match your kind of historic information as far as in district by grade, and you may have an idea how well they project out. Joan, did I send those to you? I can't remember. I don't recall. Okay.
I remember seeing
normally
at some
what-
point.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been maybe a year and a half
Yeah,
or
that's
so
right.
ago now. But we can certainly download those and send them to you, but we don't do anything internally to try and project those numbers out. We don't have that capacity.
Right.
Yeah.
But do you see the numbers from RE1, for example, are they growing at about the same percentage or more? At least in the Mid-Valley, the Mid-Valley schools, are they growing at about the same rate?
Down Valley, if they're going at the same rate we are.
Or more? In Mid-Valley, that's...
No, I don't know their numbers. I know that during the time that we saw a minor blip in 2011, they did as well with the economy having some issues. Normally what we see in education is we are somewhat delayed. When the economy struggles, we're a year or two behind, just as when it rebounds, we don't necessarily see it for a year or two after. But I know that down Valley, when the economy was in dire straits, they too were seeing a reduction in their student enrollment, but I couldn't tell you where they are currently.
I can tell you just anecdotally that Roaring Fork High School in Carbondale has definitely dropped in their enrollment to the point where they're now not in our same athletic conference. They're 1A instead of 2A. So their enrollment has definitely gone down quite a bit, but I don't know what they would attribute that to.
All right, we're going to move into finances from this chart, or?
Yeah, I guess I'd be kind of up to you guys. We were just kind of wondering how are things going now?
How are things? You want to give them a brief overview, and I just...
Well, if we go back 4 years, of course, we were struggling, as many school districts were struggling, and went through district-wide task force to see how we might reduce our overall budget. So since then, we have reduced over $2 million from our budget. We would be in a situation very dire going into this year had we not had the opportunity for the sales tax initiative and the fact that the citizens of Aspen approve those dollars. We would have been faced with having to reduce a significant number of staff. So the fact that we do have the sales tax initiative for 4 years lends us, I think, in a very comfortable place, but we know it's short term. So we're constantly looking at ways to address the future, though we think we're obviously going to do quite well over the next 4 years, though we're trying to backfill. Let's keep in mind the roughly 1.75 of which we're expecting to see about 1.6 million. That's backfilling about 2.7 that we didn't receive. So the fact that we've had to reduce, even though we're seeing some additional dollars come to the district, certainly allows us to maintain what we think is a foundational level to maintain exemplary schools and certainly provide the education that the community and, more importantly, the parents who are sending their children to our school expect. So we're comfortable for 4 years, but we know we're going to have to do some significant planning here over the next probably 18, 24 months.
And what does the Senate Bill 213 mean for that future if it moves forward to school finance? Have you guys spent much time? I'm sure you have.
Yeah, Kate and I spent a good deal of time in the winter in Denver meeting with our own legislators, as well as Senator Johnston, who is pretty much the father of Senate Bill 213. I know that Elizabeth and Sheila met with Senator Johnston just last week.
Last week, and Senator Johnston, Millie Hamner, and Diana Serco and her CEO from Oregon were also there, and Matt Hamilton was on the board. And Sheila and I have spent a lot of time this summer trying to put these numbers together with Kate and John and figure everything out, because they passed at the very end of the session, and then they tried to pull numbers together, numbers got posted, the numbers were wrong because things got revised, they found that ballot language and all. So we're getting closer to a determination of what exactly it would mean and figuring out what the dollars are. And I can give you just sort of a brief overview, if you want, of what the initiative, Senate Bill initiative amendment would be and what its impact would be on us, and possibly what its impact would be on the citizens, if you want. So it would, Senate Bill 213 is now Initiative 22, which will be Amendment 66. And they did submit enough signatures. The signatures are being verified right now, but I think they submitted twice as many as they needed, so my guess is it'll be verified. What it does is it would provide it's an income tax. It would provide $950 million for education in the state of Colorado. And the way it's taxed is it's up to the first $75,000 of earning. The tax rate would go from 4.63 to 5.0, so it's a 0.37% increase. And for people, and then if you have income above $75,000, that amount would be taxed at 0.9%. So that would go from 5.0 to 5.9%. So it's a graduated tax, and there's just two levels of it. It's two tiers, and that would presumably raise about $950 million. What the original bill did was actually authorize expenditures of about $1.13 million, and their hope is that to receive overfunding. They think that in the third or fourth year of this, then they would receive enough money to be actually able to fund everything else. So what they have kind of done is also develop levels of, the first $950 million would go towards at-risk and ELL kids, and that was a big motivator actually behind this bill, is to, they took the old school finance formula with all the factors in it and did away with those, and they're creating new ones. And this would get more money to at-risk and ELL kids in the state. The neediest special ed students would receive monies. The state would now pay for kindergarten, full-day kindergarten for everyone, and right now, they pay half-day kindergarten. In our district, we asked parents to pay the additional half-day in tuition. So while that would be, the full-day benefit would be a great benefit for our parents, the school district would, actually, funding wouldn't help us. They're providing preschool for at-risk students. Right now, they do that up to 3,200 slots in the state, and now theoretically, if they can find enough preschools and slots, it would be for every at-risk student who would get funded. Something called TLI, which is sort of a pot of money for learning innovation that every is per student. And then a little bit for, actually, I think that's another one, the next tier. So that's the big chunk of money that it would provide funds for. In terms of what Aspen would get. And John gave you a brief overview in terms of where school finance was 4 years ago. We weren't great by any means, but we were pretty stable 4 years ago. And then the state, because of the economy, became unable to fund education. And so they took the amount that they owed a district, for example, Aspen, at $18 million. And then they looked at how much they could actually pay us. And the difference they started identifying as a negative factor. So our negative factor is now about $2.6 million. It's a difference between what we're owed under current school financing and what we can actually get. Which obviously in a budget of that size is a pretty significant hit. So what they're proposing is, going forward, is replacing the old school finance with this new system. And so in conjunction with that, they're getting rid of Amendment 23, which I don't know if you talk about at all, but it was a guarantee, it's an amendment to the state constitution guaranteeing that schools would receive inflation plus 1% each year in terms of the funding would go up that much. They haven't been able to fulfill that for years. That's the negative factor piece. And so this would repeal Amendment 23 for the state constitution. And in its place, they would put in a guarantee. I don't think it's in the state constitution, but it would be a guarantee that 43% of taxes, and that would be sales, excise, and some other kind of tax, would be committed to education each year. Now, they're not committing to allocate that each year to education. They might end up saving some, but that's sort of another thing that this amendment does. So what that means for Aspen, the numbers have switched around a lot, and we're not entitled to a number of them. I mean, we do have at-risk kids, but not to an extent that we're going to receive additional funding for them, et cetera. We would get $68,000 more for our neediest special education students than we're getting for this coming school year. The TLI and some various other things we would be getting would be about $247,000. So that's a total of $315,000. Now, we'd actually realize, right now we're getting kindergarten tuition payments about $100,000, so we actually realize about $215,000 in a sort of a net gain to our budget from this. And that's the short term. That's out of the $950 million. If they do receive overfunding, we would be getting about $168,000 more in Tier A funding for the less needy students. A little bit of gifted and talented funding, and then some more TLI dollars. So that total would be about $440,000. So if they receive overfunding. So it's tough because what the state have been telling the districts for many years is, wait till the economy gets better and we'll start paying you back on that whole negative factor, and we'll try to get you back to the top, get the $2.6 million back. Now they're saying, well, actually we can't do that because of Tabor. And we're going to run into our Tabor limit as the economy improves. So you all just have to look at the new reality being where you are today. So if where we are today, if it doesn't pass, then we're just under the old school finance, which includes some things like cost of living increases, which the new school finance does away with completely, which kills Aspen.
I mean, high cost of living area.
Cost of living used to be a factor, is currently a factor under the school finance formula. Aspen's cost of living is 2.09 according to the CDE rebased 2011 figure. Telluride's 1.7, Steamboat and Summit at 1.5, and RE1 is 1.4, and those are the 5 highest in the state. And so obviously cost of living is a huge factor for us, and it's and the new bill won't recognize that at all. And that's what John and Kate spent a lot of time advocating for in the state level with our state legislators. And Mike Johnson, who obviously doesn't represent us, but is the godfather of the bill. And they said it doesn't affect enough districts for them to include it. What they did do was put it in as a mill levy override. So it's not in the new school finance formula, but we could go back to the voters and ask for it. So in terms of dollars, I kind of gave you a snapshot of dollars. It's in the $200,000 to $300,000 range if it passes, and they get $950 million. We'd get an additional, depending on how much was funded beyond that, probably an additional $200,000 to $400,000 beyond that. And that's from today's dollars, which again is $2.6 million down from where we were 4 years ago, or 2 years ago even. Yeah. So none of these scenarios are good for us. One of the problems with the new, in some ways they can kind of be viewed as somewhat of a wash. The problem is that our citizens will be paying an income tax. And so it really represents a dilemma. The board has not, we've been gathering information, we have not sat down and taken a vote on this or had a comprehensive conversation on where we all stand on it. But under the new formula, our citizens would be paying an income tax that they're not paying currently.
How much?
So I did a chart, but I'm not sure the chart is correct because I saw something in the newspaper that had a slightly different figure. But for example, the $75,000 mark is their cutoff. If you make $75,000, you'll be paying an additional $278 a year, which is not insignificant. If you're making $150,000 a year, you're paying between $950 and $1,000 more. And it ratchets up at $300,000, you're more in the $2,300, $2,500. And this is additional income tax. So it's really difficult, and you all can weigh in here. The dilemma we have as a school board is we want more education dollars for all of our students in Colorado. We care about our students, but we care just as much about every student in Colorado. This will get more money into the coffers of education in Colorado. If you take that and combine it with the 43% that they've committed to doing, then theoretically there should be more dollars. The problem is we're not getting a lot more. We're getting $200,000 to $500,000, which is more, but we might be getting that under the old system too. We're not really sure. And we would have to go to our voters and ask for more money. So the sales tax is great, and we'll get to that. That's probably a $1.5 million a year for the next 4 years addition, which helps us recoup that $2.6 million. Without that, we'd be really struggling with keeping teachers and hiring teachers. And under the new system, we would either have to do some combination of at some point renewing the income tax or going for a mill levy to our voters, which is property tax based. We could do it for cost of living, which would be, we could go as high as $5 million on that legitimately, because that's what the additional cost of living factor means to our district. But it does mean going back to our voters, saying you're paying an income tax, which is mostly helping the state. It helps us somewhat. It helps the state a lot. But we also have to come back to you and ask for more at the local level of funding. So it's difficult. I mean, we've really struggled. We've struggled, once we get the numbers, we can at least educate the voters, I think, about what it is. And we believe so strongly in education, we want more dollars for the state, but it's probably going to come down to an individual determination as to.
So, Elizabeth, if this did not pass, you would stay under the existing
correct
system, which allows for cost of living by different districts, and so how does that compare with the dollars that you would generate from the new bill?
Well, and that's what's been a little difficult to determine. I mean, the new bill's been hard enough because the figures change every couple of weeks, but under the new bill, under the current system, we had thought, well, if this doesn't pass, we'll just go along the current system and we'll gradually build back up. Although getting rid of paying down the negative factor, we'll gradually get back up to where we were. And just for the first time, I heard a couple weeks ago, from the state representatives and financial person that, no, we won't, because of Tabor. Because as the economy grows back, what they will do is they have a couple $100 million, what I was told, a couple $100 million cushion with Tabor right now in state revenues. And when they hit that, they're going to have to start rebating, like they did 10 or 15 years ago. So that the state, and it's a question as to how much of education would get of that $200 to $300 million cap, cushion before, as opposed to others. So I think they're down by $1 billion is what they should be paying to the districts that they're not. So the total negative factor on a statewide level is about $1 billion. So $200 million doesn't get us very far in terms of getting our negative factor back. But that's the hard thing, is because we say, well, is it better under the current system or is it better under the proposed system? And there's moving pieces. It's hard to figure out. We'll probably get a little more immediate money under the new system, but the citizen's going to be paying, I think, a lot more.
Yeah, and when I was talking to Representative Hander a few weeks ago about this, and she was saying, well, we understand the issue with the Aspen School District with the cost of living, so what we did was as part of this bill, we threw in the idea that you have the ability to raise your cap from the mill levy to try to make up for that. But of course, that has to go before the electorate, and that's one more additional tax that they're paying on top of the current increase. So it's really not really that helpful, even though that was sort of her way to compromise, to deal with the issues of some of the school districts that are going to lose money because of the cost of living.
Yeah, we actually met with her. She ended up not being able to be at the meeting very long in the spring, but she was pretty clear her other districts benefit significantly from this and we don't. But
yeah, I think there was one or two other districts that were sort of in a similar boat, but
yeah. So.
Yeah, like yourselves, I spent some time trying to lobby Millie and others to amend the bill to make sure we weren't hurt and that we came out a little further ahead. Just politically, it's hard to go forward to support this, with the knowledge that it means raising additional taxes locally. But I've come to kind of think about a few different elements, and one is that it does create a much more secure base for school financing no matter what. Because if we went through another economic downturn and it's just an appropriation from the state's general fund and not earmarked funds such as income tax, it's a very volatile base. And so at the very least, what they're saying they'll give to the schools is now in its own pot of money coming from that income tax. And the second is that although we don't think about it so much because we have, I know I have a short memory, the state income tax level used to be 5%, and it was lowered under Governor Owens to the 4.65 or whatever it is, and that was so they wouldn't have to do Tabor rebates every year. So we effectively made our Tabor rebate permanent, whether the economy could support it or not. And so the tiering does raise a higher income tax level than we've had in Colorado before, but essentially we're returning to the 5% level we used to have, which was for the majority of my lifetime as a Colorado resident, as a base. And at least that income tax is deductible if you itemize on the federal. So, it's this understanding that now everything is so underfunded in the state. I mean, we're not even talking about higher education problems, we're not talking about health and human service problems, and we're not talking about transportation problems, because the transportation efforts are clearly shaping up to be a 2014 1% statewide sales tax. And I have argued to keep that on gasoline tax, and this board knows that well. But the people who will fund a campaign will not fund a gasoline tax campaign, and the polling shows that people have just a knee-jerk negative reaction to the idea of a higher gasoline tax. But they're more comfortable with it being sales tax. So the challenge that presents, of course, is whether this was being renewed as a sales tax, what you have with the city, or extended further or anything, we're already going to see Aspen over, if that passes, over 10%, and that's going to come down in 2014. I've been sitting there telling these folks, it's like, look, there's no transportation tax is going to pass at all if you don't get school finance set up. If you don't get it passed, if it doesn't pass, that is people's top priority, and every poll is education for the kids. So, on to the positives. I do see the more secure base as being a positive for school education in the future, because we could see this measure fail this fall, and then the state legislature could next year just decide to eliminate the cost of living factor, period, by itself, without new revenues or anything else, and just modify the old School Finance Act and say this way we'll have more money to spread around, and there's only 5 districts that are hurt. And, so that's not a sure thing. That would always be there if this one fails, unfortunately. I also don't think you'll see a large mounted campaign of any sort to fix it for a while after you have a failed campaign. Just tends to, no one wants to touch it, everyone dies on Hamburger Hill. They're not going to go up that hill again. So, it is a little bit of a one-shot. And I think the removal of the mill levy barrier is huge for us. It's a much more of a positive than a negative. In terms of the overall act itself and the intention of the state is to move more folks back to community funding of their school districts. And Tabor had the effect, with every vote having to happen locally for mill levies, of moving school finance into the state's general fund budget. I mean, by a huge amount. They used to fund maybe 1/3, and now it's 2/3 of all school education out of the general fund. And so that's the part of the intent of the bill, is to see local districts starting to fund it to themselves and to their own levels of expectation. So there are some positives, as much as it's not perfect and it's costly.
Yeah, no, is what creates part of the dilemma for us. The local funding, it is trying to get more of the local funding. We've ranged from 70 to 100%, 100% local funding here in the district. Going forward, if this passes, actually even this year, I think we're at about 95% local funding and 5% state. What they're hoping to get from every district is 60% local and 40% state. So we are far and above. We should be. I mean, if we have the resources of assessed property values, we should be funding our schools. The problem is that you can tell this is difficult for me, because I really want more education dollars coming to the state, and I want more stable funding sources. The problem is that we'll be funding 100%, almost 100% of what is paid in income taxes will be going to help other students in the state. And it's just hard for us as a school board to tell an individual, you need to pay $400. And, 40 of that is staying here, and some is going off. Another thing we're looking at, Kate's run some figures, we're trying to find out some very good figures on income tax, how much our citizens pay in income tax. We're guessing this will be a $5 to $10 million total increase from our citizens, which is, it's great for the state, but on an individual level, it's just tough. So.
And to let it go from there, I mean, it's just a very imperfect system. We've looked at the same thing with a 1% sales tax statewide for transportation, and the way they're planning a share back, at least right now, is we would raise over $5 million in Pickens County alone. Our share back would be $500,000. And so, you kind of get it coming and going in a lot of these different discussions.
Right. Yeah, and that's the exact same thing, and that's just a tough one it's good for the state. Yeah. It's somewhat good for us, but we're going to have to come back to you in 2 years and ask you to raise your property taxes to pay more to the schools. It puts us in difficult positions.
Yeah, well, maybe you can be neutral on the statewide bill and not say you endorse both.
So,
other questions or comments?
Probably more than you wanted to know, but it's
Thanks for presenting all that, too.
Yeah, very accurate.
It's good to hear it over again.
I guess the only question would be when you guys do talk about it as a board and come up with a position, if you could share them. I'm sure we'd be interested in knowing what that was and discussing whether it makes sense for us to jump in and take that same position or not.
Yeah, and as Rachel indicated, it would be, you can oppose it, you can endorse it, or you can be neutral and just educate your voters on it. So, but we do appreciate the leadership on the issue, because it is something that has to be solved. The other thing is, they can actually go back for 4 years and do this. They can present it for the next 4 years, the next 4 elections, is my understanding. So that if it doesn't pass this year, they can actually come back.
If it's slightly different.
Yeah, there was a little unclear. Millie and Mike had different perspectives on sort of going forward part, but they are sort of setting it up that if it doesn't pass this year, they can go back.
I mean, the big challenge is raising the money for a campaign on the
Right.
second go-round and telling anybody why it's significantly different, and they're going to have a different result.
Yeah, right.
Wish it was better news.
Yeah.
Move on to, you had land dedication fees on the
Have
agenda?
Elizabeth just keep talking.
This is a quickie. So 2 of us are rolling off the board, and the 3 people who, well, Bob will probably run again. But we have 2 brand-new members, and this is one of those issues that's kind of popped up now and then. I just sort of want to throw it out again to keep it, make sure it's still alive. So as a school district, we receive in lieu fees, or we call them land dedication fees, from the city. And a number of years ago, the city revised, they updated and revised their formulas. And we worked with them on that. And it wasn't just for the schools, but for a number of open space and trails, and a number of different things. And that was great because it brought it up to modern day levels and was beneficial to us in terms of receiving money. And these fees are used for expansion and renovation of facilities. So they're not used for maintenance, those types of things. And we approached the county at the same time, this was probably 5 or 6 years ago, to see if they were also considering revising it. And they said no. And they had no interest in revising it at that time. I don't know. And we actually also approached Snowhouse Village, who does not collect any land dedication fees. And they said no, also, we're going to be going back to them. Because as John sort of laid the groundwork for, we're in a financial crunch, and it's not going away. Even under this new great solution, it's still a problem for us. And so finding any dollars we can to help is very important to us. And so I just wanted to bring that up again. I'm the one who put it on this agenda because I was just going to throw it out there. We might be revisiting this with the new board coming in. And I just wanted to kind of let you know that this is something we're interested in. If it's okay with you, we'd like to, at some point, probably in the next 6 months or a year, just talk to one of your staffers about it, see where your system is on what your calculations are, what your actual level of activity is, that sort of thing, and see if there's something we can do to maybe maximize the...
To give you a little discussion now on that.
Yeah, okay.
George, if you want to dive in a little bit. So last I saw, I think we revised back in 2006, so it must have been probably around that same timeline. And so I don't know if that happened right before maybe at the discussions with the city or what that history is. But our land dedication fees have been going down significantly, and I just did a little history from 2001 through 2012, so you can see what those collections are. And a lot of that has to do with the difference. The city and the county do have really different ways that they're approaching the land dedication fees, both collection and calculation. And so the county does the collection at subdivision and bases the collection on the intended development. And so we have a student generation ratio based on how many bedrooms, for example, the type of structure that will be built, and then have a formula based on the market value. So our fee does fluctuate up or down with market values of property. The city, when they revamped theirs, what they processed where they actually collect a building permit, and they have their student generation ratio based on the square footage of the structure. And so there's a different basis. And so that's caused a couple things. You'll see in our trends, our school land dedication fee collections have decreased significantly in recent years, and a lot of that has to do with we're not doing as many subdivisions, and there's just not as much land to subdivide. A lot of what's happening is on 35-plus acre lots, which aren't considered subdivisions, so we're not getting the school land dedication fees based on those, and that may be where there's opportunity for us to have some discussions. What's not clear to me, and what would be part of future discussions if the board wanted to go there, is if we were to make a similar transition to what the city has done to building permit, what does that mean for the subdivisions that are already paved? We'd have to work through some of those issues, but we could figure that out. But I think it'd be good to start at a staff level and maybe develop some alternatives. John, I don't know who that would be on your front, but
Kate and I worked with the city when they created it.
yeah. So that and I would imagine for me it would be our community development director and finance director to take a look at those options and see if there's some alternatives that we might want to bring back to you guys to look at.
So that land dedication fee, would we have to be consistent with RE1 as well, since we
Yes.
also have students going to RE1?
Yeah, and there's we have RE1 in the Aspen School District addressed separately, but with very similar methodologies in our code. But there's some difference in, our studies came up with some differences in the ratios that are being used. And I can't speak to the math behind that.
I'm certainly open to taking a look at it. It seems like if you moved to more of a per resident and per bedroom, and then if there was a prior subdivision, there could be some crediting back of what was already collected to the subdivision, but I really don't see us having much in the way of subdivision going forward unless it's someone doing a state subdivision of their parcel because they don't want to deal with the land use codes. We're at a certain point, I think before George got on the council, and probably certainly before Rob, of wanting to look at our housing impact fees because they seemed out of proportionally low with the city and others. And then, of course, we saw the crash in 2008. And we need Cindy here or someone to tell us, but I think there probably were close to 100 building permits that people chose to not act on and let expire. And it just seemed like such a crash of that market in the construction industry that increasing fees at that time just didn't seem to make any sense because no one was going forward with their projects anyhow.
So John, in looking at your collection history, I mean, it's obviously just dropped to almost nothing. So did you change your structure somewhere along the way? You just simply kind of stopped collecting them?
No, we're
Not
still
seeing
collecting them,
subdivisions.
but what happened for us is ours is collected at the time that land is subdivided, and we just don't have that many subdivisions coming through. We've had land subdivided in the past that has building permits going on to it now, and a lot of the activity has been on 35-plus acres, which isn't subject to subdivision. So those are the two factors. So we're collecting it the exact same way, same ratios.
I just
We
wanted
just
to
don't have that
clarify
activity, and it is a big difference.
This sort of brings up another topic. It's not on the agenda, but just as a follow-up, when Rachel mentioned housing impact fees, I'm just curious where you guys are in terms of looking at any future employee housing and what's going on with that.
Well, we're not currently looking at anything. I mean, we maxed out our dollars that we went to the voters for back in 2007, 2008. And, we're good with what we have. It's at capacity. We have 44 units, is that correct, John? 43. And, they're all rented. So there hasn't really been much discussion about going forward just with purchasing or building of anything more, because we just simply can't do that at this point. That would be for a future board to probably figure out, down the line. But right now, we're just, we're comfortable, I would say, with what we have. We've got 43 units and 200 and some staff, so. But there are always people wanting to be moving up Valley. I received 2 emails in the last couple of weeks from staff who are, for whatever reason, they've divorced, or now their spouse is working up here as well, and, a variety of reasons, and they want to live closer to their work, so.
So do you have any land available within the UGB?
Other than West Ranch, no.
Yeah, West Ranch would be, as far as I know, that's the only parcel we have that's buildable. We do still run a teacher bus down Valley, which has been very successful, so that it does help our families who live down there. So
We have a duplex in Basalt that we own on Riverside Drive, which I think that's Eagle County.
Yeah, it's Eagle County.
But the teacher bus is for anyone who lives anywhere in
And we run a teacher bus from Snowmass Village as well.
Okay, anything else on that one?
So once we sort of have a new board and get our figures together, it sounds like it would be okay for John and our CFO, Kate Fuentes, to maybe contact.
Yeah, start with me and
Yeah.
then we can figure out a process.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate this background too.
So when are board elections this fall, November?
November.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you know any qualified good candidates? I'm not sure that we have.
People are in the process now of picking up petitions, so we'll see in the next couple of weeks who.
Boy, that's right. August. Open space and trails.
Yeah, open space and trails. This is one that Bob Glay, one of our board members, brought up, and this was just for discussion. He just said, well, first of all, I'll start with the question. You all manage the open space and trails group, correct? The committee. You oversee open space and trails.
Well, yes.
You laugh. Is there no really committee?
Open Space and Trails has their own board that we appoint.
Okay.
And they actually oversee the programs and the staff. And when they're looking at an acquisition, they'll make recommendations to us, and we have the final approvals.
Okay.
So Open Space and Trails is pretty much run by their own board.
This may be,
And there's the city
There's the city
Open Space and Trails Board and
which is
department as
completely
well.
separate.
Yes.
Okay, so this may be more of something directed at them, but just as an FYI, I think what Bob really was hoping for was just to kind of lay the foundation for discussion about having more involvement with our students on the Open Space and Trails board or work that they're doing or anything, just because we use so much of the facilities that he thought, why not have some kind of student partnership there, both from a learning standpoint for the kids, but also from a volunteerism and service standpoint. So I don't think he had anything other than just having the discussion in mind. There was no real vision except to say this would be a great partnership and a great opportunity for the kids.
Yeah, and I think, Travis Moore did a great project a few years ago with the kids and with Open Space in terms of doing all the planets along the Rio Grande Trail.
Yeah, right.
So that was a great project.
Yeah. So if Bob, or if somebody wanted to pursue it, who is the board chair for your Open Space and Trails Committee?
It's Ty Jacober, but I would suggest a discussion with Dale Will, who's the Open Space and Trails Director, would probably be a better place to start.
What's Dale's last name?
Will.
Will, thanks. Okay, that's great. I mean, that may just be something that we even want to have John and the administration have in their back pocket for opportunities to work with kids, but I think that's where that came from.
Yeah, I mean, there's always opportunities for volunteers in terms of doing trail construction. Right now there's trail construction going on up on the Sky Mountain Park right now, and so there's always those opportunities to get involved.
I hate to say this, but I don't know where Sky Mountain Park is.
See,
You went in on the naming process.
I guess not.
Trust it.
What, oh, that's what we've named it? I still call it roasting, sorry. I must have missed that headline. My husband does give me grief for not reading the paper, so maybe that's why.
Yeah, and there are other volunteer opportunities I know we reach out to. We have 2 youth advisory members, for example, on our
Healthy Community.
Healthy Community,
Oh, yeah.
thank you, Grants Review Committee, and there may be other opportunities for us to talk about, if there would be meaningful linkages for either just some exposure or what have you, to volunteer in an advisory capacity or shadowing or those sorts of things that we'd be open to. Also, I don't know that we built a lot of links along those lines. And I know in the past I've been involved with teen leadership commissions and such. Have been really interesting. So if you guys ever have any interest in talking about those, I think from a staff level, we'd be open to having those discussions for sure.
You noted the empty seats out there too.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm just sitting here kind of kicking myself because we also have some board liaisons. We have 2 students that come to our meetings, and it would have been a great opportunity to bring them here if I could have gotten hold of them over the summer. But I appreciate you saying that, because that might be something that we could put on their plate as well, just to say this is available to you guys as well. Drag them into some meetings now and then just to see what they think.
And we have a lot of volunteer opportunities that
Yeah.
we could probably start to connect with. Maybe you guys
It's
could
great.
help us
A number of
market
our
it.
kids need service hours. And
Right.
We've got a number of clubs, like recycling club and other aspects that I think could connect very well with a lot of the work that you do.
All of the students who are in National Honor Society need hours, so they're always looking for opportunities. So it's great.
That's great to bring up.
Good. Okay, that was it. Short and sweet on that one. And then the last one that we had, I don't know if you guys put this on or if we did, you added this one.
Yeah, I think we did, and it's more just, I think, I'm trying to remember which board member asked for an update on the sales tax now, but you may have already answered it, I think, was to just understand how collections are going, and, is it meeting your expectations, and, who brought that forward? I apologize, I can't remember which board member.
I might have just mentioned it, but I think it's been touched upon that you're still falling short, and I think you said 1.7 is the number. I don't know what the number is.
Yeah, Elizabeth serves as our
You're-
liaison to
It's
the
generating.
Public Education Fund, so I know you brought some more information.
I did, yeah, I can give you a brief update.
She's our tax go-to gal, in case you were wondering.
Numbers. Sheila's taking on
Yeah.
her, so. So to date, it was originally estimated maybe in the $1.7 million category in terms of collections. And what happened, so the money's collected, and a separate nonprofit was established, the Aspen Public Education Fund. And the board members on that are Laura Kornasevich, Sarah Chase Shaw, Jeannie DeRemus, Susan Merold, Robin Hamill, Peter Van Domelen, and Ernie Fairwald. And they met and decided that they would, they agreed that a pool of $1.45 million was the amount that they would be comfortable committing to over the next year, just to give some leeway. I mean, there's some election expenses, and there's a small administrative fee the city's pulling, and just in case that the first year they didn't receive enough money, they didn't want to overcommit. So, so the district did submit a request for funds, and 1.422 million was approved in terms of requests, and that'll be paid. Part of that'll be paid in August, part will be paid in January, and then if they do receive additional monies, the district can come in and make additional requests, supplemental requests, because obviously there are items on their list that were in addition to 1.4. In terms of collections so far, they're pretty much on target. Through June, collections were, let's see, $812,500. And it really works out pretty much. The first 6 months of the year is pretty identical to or similar to the second 6 months of the year. So At that figure, we're on track to collect 1.625, 1.65 million. So what has been allocated is well under that amount. So we're comfortable with where we are. And again, that was a 4-year tax. It's collected for 4 years, and then originally the idea was we wouldn't have to go back to the voters and renew it because we really don't like asking.
Because we were so confident that the state was going to figure out that negative factor and it would be rebalanced and we wouldn't need to.
Yeah, so we don't know now, but this is the first of 4 years of collection, so.
And the balance rolls over, so you're saying there's a 1.6 million, you've allocated 1.4, there's a balance, obviously there's some fees and stuff, there's balance for supplemental budget request from the school district to the educational fund. But if you guys don't request supplemental amounts, it rolls over into the next year and you adjust your budget in the next year?
That's correct. It will roll over. I think the fund board felt like having a cushion from year to year was a good idea. The city did want to make sure that the funds were spent relatively promptly. So we did an intergovernmental agreement between the school district and the city of Aspen. And the IGA specifies that the fund board will exist for the 4 years, and then it can exist for an additional 2 years, because in the 5th year they'll still be spending some of the money, and just to wrap up the affairs of the fund and things like that. So the idea is that most of it is spent every year, but John and Kate could certainly come back in, as they said, if the collections are about 2 months in arrears, so they could certainly come back in March and say, we would love to do this year, and can we have the money to do that? But I think the fund board does want to keep some bit of cushion there.
Has the sales tax being in place seemed to have cut back on the private giving through the Aspen Education Foundation, or?
Actually, it has not.
Has not.
They've had increased giving. There was concern that would be a result, but actually the opposite's true. They've raised more money for us this year than any year in the last 6 that I've been here.
That's great.
Yeah.
And they have a very dynamic board, and I mean, they're doing a terrific job, so.
Very good.
That was it on our agenda, unless anybody has anything else you'd like to share with us or discuss, either boards. When's school start?
New teachers start the 19th. All teachers report on the 21st. And kids begin coming on the 26th.
Wow, it's coming right up.
Yeah, right around the corner.
Some of us can't wait.
Are the teachers going to be able to get there because of the bike race?
Yeah, the new teachers? Yeah.
They just won't be able to leave.
They have to get there before noon.
They'll be able to get there. They just won't be able to leave. So we have them for 2 days.
We indoctrinate them, get them right on their bikes.
Yeah.
I have a question. You provide quite a bit of housing for teachers. When new teachers start, do you have housing available for them, or is it just on a random basis if something is available?
It's what's available. It's usually first come, first served, so to speak. I mean, if you were being hired in June and July, there's a good chance that you would have an opportunity for district housing. If you're being hired now, we're full, so we work with the community. They're good about, there are a number of people who are very good in the community wanting only teachers as tenants. So they send us information and we pass it along. Plus, we have a property manager that works directly with us, and we put them in touch with new employees to help them find housing, affordable housing.
Just an interesting side note, my daughter teaches in a Nupiaq Eskimo village in Alaska. And most of the teachers live in the old school, which is right across the road from the new school they have there, because there is virtually no other housing available, and that's how they just made apartments out of in the old school building. But
we're blessed. It certainly is a feature that attracts teachers, and obviously, many of them would not be able to work in our district if that option was not available.
We talked about cost of living and how Aspen is at roughly 50% more than even Summit. And I actually pulled the salary schedules for all the districts, and we're only paying, sometimes in some areas we're paying less than the other districts, and even when we're paying more, it's maybe 3 to 5% more. So it's tough. Our teachers really have a tough year, but they are the best teachers in the world, and we just...
And just a statistic that's really important to us, within 3 years, 30% of our teachers turn over. And we do exit interviews, and the number one reason is affordability. They just can't afford to live here, especially if you're a single person. If you have two incomes, obviously it's a lot easier, but on a teacher's salary, unless you have a roommate, it's a real challenge to keep young people for more than 3 years in our district.
So do they tap into action housing?
Some do, yes.
Some do.
Once they qualify.
Yeah.
Most of them are
4
just,
years.
that they,
Yeah, we have, a few years ago, modified our retirement program to allow folks to borrow from their retirement program for down payment for housing. And I think there may even be some small pool left, John would have to refresh my memory, of almost like an incentive to try to get in the lottery and win a unit that, would help with the closing cost or things like that, to give people a little more of that push to try to secure housing that's not tied to their job and that's not tied to our budgets of having created it, but it's out there in the general public. I don't know, do you do anything like that? Or?
We have a loan program that we try to encourage and support our teachers to seek housing, and we certainly are there to encourage and provide guidance and even financial support if they do that.
And you guys are also partners with us on the Valley Health Alliance?
Yes,
Yeah.
we are.
So
Appreciate that.
yeah, that's great
it's been good.
to see that program move forward.
That'd be a win-win for all of us. We get that working.
Yeah, we finally have a proposal that we're looking at, so.
Well, good.
Good, we'll stay in touch. We don't have to wait a year if there's ever anything that comes up, or just a question or whatever, but it's always nice. I think it's a good linkage to have good conversation at least once a year.
Good, well, thank you all for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for supplementing that.
Grassroots, we're going to adjourn for the day. Thank you. And we're back here tomorrow at noon.
Back here tomorrow.